The woman clothed in the sun, with the moon under her feet, wearing a crown of 12 stars. She is threatened by a 7-headed red dragon, one of the many, many fantastical images from the book of Revelation. This story is in chapter 12 of the book of Revelation. What could it possibly mean? Numerous theories have been offered, including one with astrological ingredients. However, these past theories are all misleading misinterpretations. Come with me into a logical, mystical, and correct interpretation of this prophetic vision story. If you have watched any of the previous videos in this course, you know not to take any of this literally. And some of you may already have a clue what's going on here because you know what the moon and sun signify, and the red dragon too. This is the table of contents for the whole course on the book of Revelation. There are 12 videos in all. This is the overall plan for the course. I recommend that you start at video number 1, watch all the videos in order, and not skip any. This video covers chapters 12, 13, and 14. This is video 8 that you see in the pink box. Note that this video's table of contents is located in the description of the video. The description is located under the video title on YouTube. Some instructions how to access the description are on the next slide. This explanation uses a different one of my videos on YouTube as an example. You can see the video's title here below the video screen. This video's title is Interpretations of Nebuchadnezzar's Statue Are Wrong. Now the arrow is pointing to the description of that video. Only a couple lines of the description are shown. Then, if there is more to the description, you'll see 3 dots and the word More. Click on the word More to access the full contents of the description. That is where you'll find any links to other videos or websites or other information that I mentioned in this video. You probably will need to copy the website address and paste it into your internet browser. I don't believe YouTube allows direct links. The short section starts us off with some background on the book of Revelation, the sources used in the development of this video, and a few other tidbits of information. There's just a few slides to make sure some basics are covered. Otherwise, you may not understand the context of these chapters. First, you need to understand that the book of Revelation is truly a prophetic vision story. It is not a story about politics in the Roman Empire. I say that because there has been a lot of conjecture about the book of Revelation being a hidden attack on the Roman Empire and its emperor because of the persecution of Christians. That is not the case. This story was written down by John of Patmos after he received the vision from an angel that was sent to him by Jesus Christ. This vision occurred sometime around 95 Common Era, more than 60 years after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Revelation foretells 3 woes, who are prophets or manifestations of God, who would appear in the future to John of Patmos, that is. They would appear sequentially, not all at the same time, although the 3rd woe would appear soon after the 2nd woe. There are 3 sources of the content of this video. The first source is Abdu'l-Baha. He wrote a commentary on verses 1 through 6 of chapter 12. His commentary is actually available for free online. I'll put that information in the description of this video. The second source is Dr. Alan D. Clark from his book titled Understanding the Revelation to St. John. Unfortunately, Dr. Clark's book is now out of print, and finding copies of it can be difficult. The third source is myself, the producer and writer and narrator of this video. I'll add additional explanations when I think they are needed. The tables and graphs are mine. You may wonder who Abdu'l-Baha was. He was born in 1844 and died in 1921. He was the son of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Bahá'í faith. Baha'u'llah designated him to be the head of the Bahá'í faith after Baha'u'llah's passing in 1892. Baha'u'llah bestowed upon Abdu'l-Baha special knowledge and abilities. Abdu'l-Baha had a very special, divinely ordained station in this new faith of God called the Bahá'í faith. Baha'u'llah designated him the position of the center of his covenant. We Baha'is are to look to Abdu'l-Baha as the exemplar of how a true Baha'i would live and act. The interpretation of verses 1 through 6 of chapter 12 is quoted from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha from his book, Some Answered Questions. Dr. Clark in his book also quotes Abdu'l-Baha as the authoritative text on these first 6 verses. Abdu'l-Baha goes through the 6 verses verse by verse to explain each. I think you'll find his written comments to be logical and revealing. And this explanation is available for free online. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. How this information will be presented is as follows. First, a quotation from chapter 12 will be given. Note that the King James Version of the Bible is used by Abdu'l-Baha. Then Abdu'l-Baha's commentary, direct quotes, will be given. That's for verses 1 through 6. Starting with verse 7, the source of explanations are from Dr. Clark's book. Additional comments, explanations, and graphics by me may be given if needed. Here's an illustration of the format or design of this presentation to facilitate your understanding. Quotes of Abdu'l-Baha's commentary on verses 1 through 6 will be in white background boxes with black lettering, as you see at the top of this slide. When he quotes verses from chapter 12 or other chapters of Revelation, it will be in bold lettering, highlighted in yellow, as you see here. Verses that he's quoting from other books of the Bible will have a green or teal highlighting. Quotes by our second author Dr. Clark, will be in quotation marks. Paraphrased information from Dr. Clark's book will not be in quotation marks. My own comments, charts, and graphs will be without quotation marks. We will begin chapter 12 with some opening commentary from Dr. Clark's book titled Understanding the Revelation to St. John. Before we dive into the verses of chapter 12, Dr. Clark provides some essential information that must be known in order to understand the full picture. These are all quotes or paraphrases from Dr. Clark's book, although no quotation marks are shown. First thing, the Bible contains many allusions to the bride of the messenger of God. Ezekiel's chapter 16 explains this symbol. In those verses it is found a lamentation over the fate of Jerusalem, which in its earliest days is likened to an infant girl found lying helpless in the wilderness. God states that he nurtured and cared for her throughout her early life, and in her youth entered into a covenant with her, marrying her when she came of age. Unfortunately, the woman, Jerusalem, became unfaithful to God and began to worship idols of wood and stone. As the years passed, she became like a most loathsome prostitute, even paying her lovers for their attentions. The children of Jerusalem suffered from the infidelity of their mother, who willingly sacrificed her children, throwing them into the fiery arms of the idol Moloch. Book of Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 21, further explains what is meant by infidelity of religion regarding Jerusalem. Speaking of Jerusalem, he says, "How the faithful city has become a harlot. It was full of justice, righteousness lodged in it, but now murderers." Jerusalem had been full of justice and righteousness, but these heavenly qualities were replaced by the spirit of murder. The spirit of murder, like the worship of idols, proceeds from man's rebellion against God's law. The pure religion of God, however, is likened to a young bride. She is virtuous, chaste, and filled with an abiding love for her husband. God has promised that in the future, Jerusalem, religion, will again become righteous. He has sworn that he will neither rest nor be silent until Jerusalem shines forth as a beacon of salvation to others. This religion he will again call his bride. That's in Isaiah chapter 62, verses 1 through 5. The city of Jerusalem, sometimes symbolized as the bride, symbolically represents religion as practiced by the people. When the messenger of God first proclaims the laws of God, they are in their pure form. Over time, the spirit of the law is corrupted by human institutions. The pure teachings of the messengers of God are likened to a faithful bride. The corruption and violation of those laws is likened to the worst type of marital infidelity. The bride is depicted in the first verse of chapter 12. And so begins the commentary on verses 1 through 6 by Abdu'l-Baha. It begins with a preface that includes some explanation of chapter 21 of the book of Revelation. Then Abdu'l-Baha gets into chapter 12 itself. We have explained before that what the sacred scriptures most often mean by the holy city or divine Jerusalem is the religion of God, which has at times been likened to a bride, or called Jerusalem, or depicted as the new heaven and the new earth. Thus, in Revelation chapter 21, it is said, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God." Consider how unmistakably the first heaven and the first earth refer to the outward aspects of the former religion. For it is said that the first heaven and the earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. That is, the earth is the arena of the last judgment, and in this arena there will be no more sea, meaning that the law and teachings of God will have spread throughout the earth. All mankind will have embraced his cause, and the earth will have been entirely peopled by the faithful. Thus there will be no more sea, for man dwells upon solid land and not in the sea. That is, in that dispensation, the sphere of influence of that religion will encompass every land that man has trodden, and it will be established upon solid ground, whereon the feet do not falter. Likewise, the religion of God is described as the holy city, or the New Jerusalem. Clearly, the New Jerusalem, which descends from heaven, is not a city of stone and lime, of brick and mortar, but is rather the religion of God which descends from heaven and is described as new. For it is obvious that the Jerusalem which is built of stone and mortar does not descend from heaven and is not renewed, but that what is renewed is the religion of God. Furthermore, the religion of God is likened to an adorned bride who appears with the utmost grace, as it has been said in chapter 21, verse 2 of the Revelation of John. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And in chapter 12, verse 1, note this is the start of the review of chapter 12 verses. To continue, it is said, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed in the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars." This woman is that bride, the religion of God that descended upon Muhammad. The sun with which she was clothed, and the moon which was under her feet, are the two governments which are under the shadow of that religion, the Persian and the Ottoman, for the emblem of Persia is the sun, and that of the Ottoman Empire is the crescent moon. Thus the sun and the moon allude to two governments under the shadow of the religion of God. Afterwards it is said, "Upon her head a crown of 12 stars." These 12 stars represent the 12 Imams, who were the promoters of the religion of Muhammad and the educators of the nation, and who shone as stars in the heaven of guidance. End quote. Note that I will explain more about these 12 Imams being those 12 stars on the woman's crown. Just to highlight and clarify a few points. The woman is the bride. It is the law of God, the new pure faith of Islam, before the effects of the two bad beasts of Revelation on it. More about these two bad, despicable beasts in chapters 12 and 13 later. Note the third bad beast will arrive on the scene later in chapter 13. Only its despicable behavior will affect the Lamb and he who sits on the throne, not Muhammad's faith. The sun and the moon are the emblems of two kingdoms. The sun is a symbol of Persia and the moon of the Ottoman Empire, or the sun of the Shia branch of Islam and the moon of the Sunni branch of Islam. Back to Abdu'l-Baha's commentary, quote, "Then it is said, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered." That is from Revelation chapter 12, verse 2, meaning that this religion will suffer great difficulties and endure great toil and trouble until a perfect offspring is produced therefrom, that is, until the subsequent and promised manifestation, who is a perfect offspring, is reared in the bosom of this religion, which is even as its mother. By this offspring is meant the Bab, the primal point, who was in truth born from the religion of Muhammad. In other words, that sacred reality which was the child and the result of the religion of God, its mother, and which was its promised one, came into being in the heavenly kingdom of that religion, but was caught up unto God to elude the ascendancy of the dragon. After 1260 days of the dragon was destroyed and the offspring of the religion of God, the promised one, was made manifest. Verse 3, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth." This dragon represents the Umayyads, who seized the reins of the religion of Muhammad, and the 7 heads and the 7 crowns represent the 7 dominions and kingdoms over which they came to rule: the Roman dominion in Syria, the Persian, the Arabian, and the Egyptian dominions, the dominion of Africa, that is, Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria, the dominion of Andalusia, which is now Spain, and the dominion of the Turkish tribes of Transoxania. I thought it might be helpful to mention at this point what exactly a beast is in Bible prophecy terminology. It is an earthly, meaning human, king and or his kingdom or empire. Whether a verse is speaking of a king or his kingdom depends on the context of the verse. You may wonder the source of this definition. The prophecy terminology in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation are very, very closely aligned. Also, the time prophecy math is the same to further highlight this similarity. The source of this meaning of beast is from the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 17, shown here, quote, "These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth," end quote. Arise out of the earth shows that they are human kings, not spiritual or divine kings like Moses or Jesus. Type of beast defines the type of earthly king or kingdom the verse is referencing. For instance, a lamb is a meek, humble king or kingdom. A serpent is a cold-blooded, often venomous king or kingdom. A dragon is a large serpent, thus a large, powerful, venomous, and evil king or kingdom. There are three bad beasts in the book of Revelation. These three beasts appeared sequentially through time. Beasts number 1 and 2 were enemies of God's law brought by the Prophet Muhammad, and they had significant negative and in some ways devastating effects on the leadership of Islam. They corrupted the provisions that Muhammad had specified to perpetuate divine guidance of the faith. However, the Quran, the holy book he brought, was not corrupted. Only the worldly leadership was corrupted. The first beast was the red dragon, which were the Umayyad clan leaders of Islam, which took over with the fifth caliph of Sunni Islam. Muawiyah was his name. By calling it a dragon, you can see that they were large, venomous, powerful kings and kingdom. This table is about beast number 1, the red dragon. It was the worst of the three bad beasts in the sense that it forever crippled the spiritual underpinnings of Islam, and it basically created the other two beasts that followed it. In column 1, 3 verses are given wherein this beast number 1 is mentioned with a description. Their descriptions are in column 2. At the top, chapter 9, verse 11 describes a king who was the angel of the bottomless pit. This king was beast number 1. In column number 2, paragraph B from chapter 11, verse 7, this beast was the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit, obviously related to the verse above it under A from the bottomless pit reference. Then in column 1, paragraph C at the bottom left, that's from chapter 12, verse 3, it's described as a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. As to the identities of this beast, who were they? That's in column 3. A man named Abu Sufyan, the emir or king of Mecca at the time, who was that at the time that Muhammad arose as a prophet of God. This Abu Sufyan was the beast at the start. Then his son Muawiyah carried on in his father's footsteps. After them, their descendants carried on their treachery through their clan, the Umayyad dynasty of Sunni Islamic rulers. This person, Muawiyah, is important to remember because he was basically the personification of the Antichrist of the Muhammadan dispensation. Now, if we look in column 4, you can see that this beast opposed Muhammad and Ali at first. then continued their persecution of the descendants of Muhammad through Muhammad's daughter Fatima and her husband Ali. And remember, beast number 1 is the great red dragon. Some additional terms to explain: heads, horns, and what a crown symbolizes. Remember from verse 3 of chapter 12, quote, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads." By heads is meant the number of countries or dominions over which this beast wields power. So this dragon having 7 heads means it had 7 dominions within its empire. By the number of horns is meant the number of kings or emperors of concern in the prophecy. This red dragon had 10 horns, meaning 10 kings. In this case, it means 10 different names of the rulers, although there were some names that were shared by 2 or more people with the same name. So there were more than 10 actual rulers. It's just that their names, if you eliminate duplicates, were 10. A crown is a symbol of reward and or authority. If the crown is described as a golden crown, it means divine authority. However, if there is no description of the crown being gold, that means it is not divine in authority. That authority is purely secular and worldly. If a verse states that it's a crown that looks like gold, that means there is an appearance of divine authority, but it is not really divine in reality. It just gives the outward appearance of it, perhaps meaning it signifies hypocrisy. You'll find that when artists do renditions of some of the scenarios in the book of Revelation, they often put a crown in that's gold. When it's in the verses, it's not actually mentioned as being gold. So you have to be careful when you're looking at artists' renditions of the scenes in the book of Revelation. This map shows those 7 dominions of the Islamic Empire under bad beasts number 1 and 2 of the book of Revelation. These 7 dominions are shaded in various colors. The light gray areas surrounding it were not part of the dominions under the first 2 bad beasts during these times. The red bordered legend in the bottom left corner shows a number for each of those 7 dominions on the map by the referenced numbers. Note that the white borders on the map are modern-day national boundaries, not in existence at the time of the Islamic Empire, which changed its configurations throughout the centuries after the first caliph, after the death of Muhammad in the year 632 Common Era. To continue with verse 3 explanation, quote, "The Umayyads gained power over all these dominions. The 10 horns represent the names of the Umayyad rulers, for, barring repetition, they are 10 sovereigns or 10 names of chiefs and rulers. The first is Abu Sufyan and the last is Marwan. Some of their names have been repeated, including 2 Muawiyahs, 3 Yazids, 2 Walids, 2 Marwans. If, however, these names are each counted only once, they number 10 in total. These Umayyads, the first of whom was Abu Sufyan, the former chief of Mecca and founder of the dynasty, and the last of whom was Marwan, destroyed 1/3 of the holy and sanctified souls who descended from the pure lineage of Muhammad, and who were even as the stars of heaven." Verse number 4, quote, "And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born." This woman is the religion of God, as was before explained. The dragon standing near her signifies that it was keeping watch to devour her child as soon as it had been delivered. This child was the promised manifestation, who is the offspring of the religion of Muhammad. The Umayyads were ever anxious to lay hold on the promised one who was to appear from the lineage of Muhammad, that they might destroy and annihilate him, for they greatly feared his advent. And so wherever they found a descendant of Muhammad who was respected in the eyes of the people, they killed him. Verse 5, quote, "And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron." This glorious Son is the promised manifestation, who was born of the religion of God and reared in the bosom of the divine teachings. The iron rod is a symbol of might and power. It is not a sword, and means that he will shepherd all the nations of the earth by virtue of his divine might and power. And by this Son is meant the Bab. End quote. Please note that after we finish the commentary by the first author on verses 1 to 6, I'll give a brief review of who the Bab was for those of you who did not watch the video about chapter 11. Verse 5 continued, quote, "And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne." End quote. This is a prophecy concerning the Bab, who ascended to the kingdom, the throne of God, and the seat of his sovereignty. Consider how closely this conforms to what indeed came to pass. End quote. Verse 6, quote, "And the woman fled into the wilderness." That is, the religion of God, meaning Islam, betook itself to the desert, meaning the vast desert of Hijaz and the Arabian Peninsula. Verse 6 continued, "Where she hath a place prepared of God." That is, the Arabian Peninsula became the home, the habitation, and the focal center of the religion of God, meaning Islam. Verse 6 continued, "That they should feed her there 1,260 days." According to the terminology of the Bible, these 1,260 days mean 1,260 years, as was before explained. Thus, for 1,260 years, the religion of God was fostered in the vast desert of Arabia until the promised one appeared. After these 1,260 years, that religion ceased to be in effect, for the fruit of that tree had been manifested, and its result had been produced. The author then provides a summary of the meaning of verses 1 through 6. Quote, "Consider how closely the prophecies correspond one to another. The book of Revelation fixes the advent of the promised one after 42 months. The prophet Daniel specifies 3 times and a half, which is also 42 months or 1,260 days. Another passage of the Revelation of John directly states 1,260 days, and it is explicitly indicated in the Bible that each day signifies 1 year. Nothing could be clearer than this agreement of the prophecies with each other. Bab appeared in the year 1260, according to the calendar followed by all Muslims. There are no clearer prophecies than this in the Bible for any manifestation. If one be fair, the agreement between the times indicated by these glorious souls is the most conclusive proof and can in no wise be subject to any other interpretation. Blessed are the fair-minded who search after truth. When justice is lacking, however, the people challenge, dispute, and deny the obvious. Their conduct is like that of the Pharisees in the time of Christ, who would obstinately deny the interpretations and utterances he and his apostles made, and who would willfully obscure the truth before the ignorant masses, saying, "These prophecies do not apply to Jesus, but to the promised one who will ere long appear according to the conditions mentioned in the Torah," among which being that he would be a king, sit upon the throne of David, enforce the law of the Torah, inaugurate the most great justice, and cause the wolf and the lamb to gather at the same spring, and thus did they veil the people from recognizing Christ. That's end quote. That's the end of Abdu'l-Baha's commentary on verses 1 through 6 of chapter 12. Before we continue with the remaining verses, several slides of explanatory notes, including some graphics, are provided next that will hopefully clarify some of the information you just learned. The Bible time prophecy term of 1260 days needs some explanation. In the first column on the left are several terms that all add up to 1260 days, and these 1260 prophetic days mean 1260 actual Earth years. The three columns headings of this table are the Bible time prophecy term is in the first column on the left, then the math is given in the middle column, and the meaning is in the right column labeled lunar years. That's lunar, not Gregorian solar years, because all these time prophecies concern happenings in the Islamic dispensation of Muhammad. And remember, Bible scholars agree that in Bible time prophecies, a day in prophecy equals a year to us humans on planet Earth. The first term is time, times, and half a time is the same as 1 year, which is a time, plus 2 years, that's from the term times, plural, plus half a time, which is half a year, meaning 180 days. Altogether, this time plus times plus 1/2 time equation equals 1260 prophetic days, which in turn equals 1260 lunar years, as you see in the right column. In the next row, 42 months equals 42 months times 30 days per month, which equals 1260 days, which again equals 1260 years. A month in Bible time prophecies is 30 days, and a year of 30-day months equals 360 days in a year for prophecies. Next, 3 days and a half. That's 3.5 prophetic days equals 3.5 years equals 1260 days equals 1260 years on earth. And last, 1,203 score days, the phrasing of the King James Version of the Bible, the Middle English Version, 1,260 days equals 1,260 lunar years. Note that all these terms on the left are equal in length in terms of Earth years, lunar years on Earth, and they are all the same period of time. They start at the same time and end, that is, are fulfilled and bear fruit, in the same Earth year. It is important to remember that the actual Earth year is a time prophecy. Depends on the calendar being used. Because this time prophecy is about the dispensation of Islam, the lunar calendar year is used in calculating the year of fulfillment. Then it is converted to the Gregorian year of 1844, Common Era. Here you again see those time prophecy terms in the left column, but in this table I've put the source of those terms in the middle column. It's either the book of Revelation or the book of Daniel, or as in the first term there, time, times, and half a time, that's found in both Daniel and Revelation. As mentioned, there are many similarities in the time prophecies and imagery between Revelation and Daniel. And, as you see in the far right column, they all mean the exact same period of time, and they would be fulfilled in the same year. This timeline begins on the left at year 500 of the Gregorian or Western calendar. Muhammad began teaching his revelation from God around the year 613 Common Era. Muhammad chose a calendar for all Islam as a lunar calendar that began in the year 622 Common Era, when he had to flee Mecca and go to Medina due to murderous threats against his life. The beginning of the Islamic calendar is now shown on the left as it relates to the Gregorian calendar. The 1260-day prophecy of the duration of the Quranic dispensation begins with the start of the calendar in that year 622 Common Era. Because it's a lunar calendar, we must add 1260 lunar years, which gets us to the Gregorian year of 1844 Common Era that you see at the bottom right corner. That leads to the question, did anything happen in 1844 of consequence, you may ask? So, what happened in the year 1844? In May of 1844, a young man in Shiraz, Persia, proclaimed that he was the expected Mahdi, that's the 12th Imam, that's expected by Muslims to redeem Islam. He also announced that another prophet would soon appear, greater than he, who would be the expected Messiah to the Jews, Christians, Muslims, and other faiths. During his 6 years of earthly ministry, he accrued a large following in Persia. Some estimate possibly into the hundreds of thousands. These devoted followers, called Babis, alarmed the Muslim clergy and government leadership, including the Shah himself and his prime minister. Government and religious leaders felt threatened by the Bab's popularity. Apparently they feared the loss of their positions in society and the power they enjoyed. Just a note that the Bab had 18 disciples called the Letters of the Living. The Bab is also the lamb in the book of Revelation. Just as lambs can be a sacrifice animal, the Bab sacrificed his life to bring his message from God. The Bab was killed by the Persian army on July 9, 1850, upon the order of the Shah and his prime minister, who had hopes, along with the Muslim clergy, that the Bab's death would put an end to this new faith, called at that time the Bahá'í faith. These are photos of the Shrine of the Bab, which is located on the side of Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel. After the Bab's martyrdom in July of 1850, his body was hidden for decades by his followers. It was transported to Mount Carmel and interred in the foundation of his shrine in 1909. The superstructure of the shrine with its golden dome was completed in 1953. Since the Bab was the Elijah figure to the new Messiah who would soon appear after his death, it is such an amazing and fitting tribute for his eternal resting place to be on the very same mount that the original Elijah lived and did the bidding of God. This is just a reminder that the remaining verses in chapter 12 are interpreted by Dr. Alan D. Clark in his book titled Understanding the Revelation to St. John, and I will add additional explanations when I think they're needed. Verses 7 and 8, quote, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven." End quote. The red dragon, as you should recall, represents the Umayyad dynasty of Sunni Islam leadership, starting with Abu Sufyan, the archenemy of Muhammad, along with his son Muawiyah, who was the personification of the Antichrist of the Muhammadan dispensation. Muawiyah, as a result of his corrupt and violent actions, became the fifth caliph of the Sunni Islamic Empire. The Umayyads were constantly vigilant for the appearance of the promised Mahdi or Qaim, that's the expected promised one of Shia Islam, but not to set him, the Mahdi, up as the leader of Islam when he appeared, but rather to eliminate him so they could keep worldly power and wealth to themselves. very similar to the reaction of the Jewish clergy to the appearance of Jesus Christ on the scene. The 1260 years has already been explained. This period ended in the Gregorian year 1844 Common Era. That year is very important. Remember it, 1844. Here are the verses about Michael in the Bible, minus one mention in the book of Jude about Michael contending with the devil over the body of Moses. Row number 1 at the top. Daniel chapter 10 verses 13 and 14. Chapter 10 is about the man that Daniel spoke to in a vision he had that was recounted in chapter 10 of Daniel. Quote, "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me," the man Daniel saw and spoke with in the vision, 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes of Persia, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. End quote. The man who appears to Daniel in chapter 10 was the Bab. The Bab told Daniel that a prince of Persia was giving him problems, but that Michael had helped him out. Then Daniel states that the man, the Bab, told him that Michael was one of the chief princes too. All indications are that Michael was also a prince of Persia, according to this verse. Remember, some princes become kings. One of these two princes became a secular king of Persia. The other, Michael, became a spiritual king, the Messiah of the latter days. The very next verse tells us when the substance of the vision will be fulfilled. Verse 14, quote, "Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days." End quote. To emphasize the point, the man, the Bab, states the vision is about the latter days, when Michael will appear as the Messiah. The second row, the next verse about Michael, Daniel chapter 10, verse 21, still in chapter 10, 7 verses later, quote, "But I will shew thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, and there is none that beholdeth with me in these things, but Michael, your prince." End quote. Note the "your prince." It means Daniel's prince, meaning the Messiah to the Jews, who are Daniel's people. Third row, then there's Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. Chapter 12 is often subtitled as the end times, such as in the New International Version, and the time of the end in the New American Standard Bible, for just two examples. Quote, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people," again a reference to the Messiah to the Jews, "and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book." End quote. And the last row in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verses 7 and 8, the verse we mentioned before, quote, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven." End quote. Verse 7 of chapter 12 introduces Michael as warring against the red dragon. Let's review some facts about Michael. First, note that Michael appears in the book of Revelation after the Bab, the lamb, does. And just for your information, the name Michael means one who looks like God. In the book of Daniel, chapter 10, verses 13, 20, and 21, Michael is mentioned as being at war with the prince of Persia. And remember, princes often become kings. Also in Daniel, Michael is referred to as Daniel's chief prince, also referred to as your prince, meaning Daniel's prince, which means a prince to the Jews, meaning the Messiah to the Jews. And just For emphasis, to make it clear, all of this means that Michael, the Archangel Michael, is the Messiah of the latter days, and that Michael, the Messiah of the latter days, will battle with a prince of Persia, an earthly prince. It needs to be clarified here that the book of Revelation has two main divine figures being foretold. They are referred to in the text seen here in the left column as the Lamb with a capital L and He who sits on the throne. The Lamb is the Elijah figure, the forerunner to the He who sits on the throne. The Lamb is a person called the Bab, which in English means the gate or door. Bab is the offspring of the woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet, that is mentioned at the beginning of chapter 12. The Bab is the expected redeemer of Islam, known as the Mahdi, according to Islamic prophecies. He who sits on the throne is the Messiah to come, expected by Jews, Christians, and Muslims, the Messiah of the latter days, who is Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God in English. Some additional facts. Baha'u'llah was literally a prince of Persia in that he was a descendant of the last Sasanian dynasty king of Persia, Shah Yazdegerd III. Baha'u'llah was initially a disciple of the Bab, although he never physically met him. The Bab was persecuted by the crown prince of Persia, Nasiruddin. This crown prince participated in the trial of the Bab. When Nasiruddin became Shah in 1838, he put even more energy into the persecution of the Bab's followers. Nasiruddin, who was a crown prince and future Shah, was the third bad beast of the book of Revelation, the one termed 666. The Bab, when he knew he would soon be killed, sent his pen, writing utensils, and some other personal items to Baha'u'llah in a symbolic gesture of his passing the scepter of authority and leadership to Baha'u'llah. So Baha'u'llah, who lived from 1817 to 1892, was the earthly presence of Michael as the second coming of the Messiah of the latter days. Dr. Alan D. Clark, in Understanding the Revelation to St. John, his book, sums up the appearance of Michael in the 1800s. Quote, Michael is promised to appear in the 12th chapter of Daniel when the abomination of desolation ends. This is the same event which Jesus gave as one of the signs of his return. That's from Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. Also in the 12th chapter of Daniel, the year when the abomination of desolation will end is foretold. In the 1800s, Christian scholars around the world came to understand that that year was 1844. In the verse of Daniel quoted above, Michael's coming is also associated with the second advent of Christ, because when Michael comes, the Jews will return to the Holy Land. This is also one of the signs which Jesus gave to herald his return. That's in Luke chapter 21, verse 24. The Jews, we have seen, were allowed to return to Israel for the first time since their dispersal by the Muslims in 1844. End quote from Dr. Clark's book. Note that there were Jews in the Holy Land since the time of Moses. When Jews were dispersed out of the Holy Land, that did not mean that every single Jew was gone. Those who remained were subject to being considered second or even third-class residents. Non-Muslims, including Jews, were subject to special taxes and fees, some justified, many not justified. In the year 1844, the Ottoman Empire amended some laws that would then allow Jews equal consideration and protection under the law, and permitted Jews to legally return to the Holy Land. The Messiah has made his appearance in the world. The entity titled He Who Sits on the Throne in the book of Revelation has made his presence known in our story. His divine name for this new spiritual era is Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God. A brief history follows. Baha'u'llah was born in Tehran, Persia, on November 12, 1817. He became a disciple of the Bab. He was imprisoned, tortured, all his properties and wealth was confiscated. Then he was exiled because of his beliefs and teachings. While in the Black Pit prison in Tehran, he received a vision that he was the one predicted by the Bab, the one the Bab had titled, Him Whom God Shall Make Manifest. Please recall that the Bab was martyred at the order of the king on July 9, 1850. The king and his cronies persecuted the followers of the Bab. In 1853, the king of Persia banished Baha'u'llah to Baghdad in an attempt to further disrupt the Babis, the followers of the Bab. In 1863, 10 years later, outside of Baghdad, Baha'u'llah made his first public announcement that he was him whom God shall make manifest, meaning the Messiah, foretold by the Bab. Then Baha'u'llah suffered several additional exiles as a prisoner, until in 1868 he was put into the prison in Akka in Palestine. It's actually called a prison city, Akka is. It's now in Israel. It was in the Ottoman Empire then. Akka is across the bay from Haifa, Israel, along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Baha'u'llah passed away in 1892 and is buried outside of Akka. Baha'u'llah wrote hundreds of tablets and books. Many of these texts are accessible for free at the website you see there, baha'i.org/library. I will give more details later in this video, plus I will list this website in the description of this video. He wrote to the kings and rulers of many countries, announcing his presence and giving them his counsels. One of his counsels is regarding how to achieve world peace. The world center of his faith, the Bahá'í faith, is in Haifa, Israel, on the side of Mount Carmel. The glory of the Lord told Ezekiel that he would make Israel the place of his footsteps and of his throne, and that he would dwell among the Israelites forever. Baha'u'llah was imprisoned in Akka in 1868 for several years, then under house arrest until just a few years before his death in 1892. He is buried outside of Akka. Baha'u'llah therefore quite literally fulfilled the words of the glory of the Lord to Ezekiel. That's in Ezekiel chapter 43, verses 1-7, for the full story. Baha'u'llah passed away in 1892 and is buried outside of Akka, Israel. On the left is the shrine of Baha'u'llah, where he is interred. On the right is a photo of this same shrine, showing a portion of the lovely gardens that surround it. Now we get back to chapter 12, about that war in heaven reference in verse 7. The word heaven here signifies the religion of God. Per Dr. Alan D. Clark in his book, this book, Religion of God, means the good graces of God. To be cast out of heaven means to be cast out or rejected by the manifestation or prophet of God. The dragon being referred to as Satan or the devil means the theocracy of the beast would be corrupt and would be cast out or rejected by the manifestation of God, the Messiah of the latter days, who would be he who sits on the throne mentioned in the book of Revelation. Verse 9, quote, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." End quote. Next we have that clause from verse 9, quote, "And the great dragon was cast out." After 90 years of misleading and corrupting the leadership of the religion of Muhammad, the Umayyad leadership was murdered and their powerful positions taken over by members of the Abbasid clan. This occurred in the year 750 Common Era. To be clear, the Abbasids were the ones who murdered the Umayyad members in positions of power in the Islamic Empire. Thus, the red dragon of the Umayyad leadership was cast out, just as foretold in verse 9. The Abbasid clan took over the dominions and power of the Umayyads, thus they became beast number 2, and we will learn more about them in chapter 13. Verse 10, quote, "And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." End quote. We start off explaining this phrase, "accused them before our God day and night," a special significance to the terms day and night. The specific application of this verse is to the two kingdoms of the Islamic faith alluded to at the end of verse 10, day and night. That is, day means the sun, which means the Shah of Persia, and night is symbolized by the moon, which is symbolized by the Sultan of Turkey, of the Ottoman Empire. The reference to day and night is an allusion to the lands of the sun and the moon, meaning Persia and the Ottoman Empire, and their rulers, the Shah and the Sultan, respectively, and their sects of Islam, Shia and Sunni. Day and night represents these two countries and the two sects of Islam. The government and clergy of Persia attacked the Bab, the forerunner, and Baha'u'llah, the Messiah, and both the Bahá'í faith and the later Bahá'í faith, their followers. The Ottoman Empire, in collusion with the government of Persia, imprisoned and persecuted Baha'u'llah and his followers, the Baha'is. Baha'u'llah wrote to both of the rulers calling upon them to renounce their injustice and turn to God. They both refused to accept the counsel of God's latest messengers. Baha'u'llah prophesied that both of these rulers would lose their kingdoms, which did come true. The clergy of both the Sunni and Shia branches of Islam refused to acknowledge the divine stations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah has forever eliminated the institution of the clergy. It says something about something or someone being cast down. Who or what was it, you might ask? The clergy of both branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia, attacked the Bahá'í and Bahá'í faiths, and of course their founders, the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah wrote to both of the kings of these nations, calling on them to renounce their injustice and turn to God. When they refused, Baha'u'llah prophesied both of their downfalls, which came to pass. For the Islamic clergy, a similar fate has overtaken them. The results of the rebellion of these two governments and the clergy of the two branches of Islam, Baha'u'llah, the Messiah for these latter days, determined their futures, according to Dr. Clark in his book, quote, "Whereas the institution of kingship has only been eclipsed, the institution of the clergy has been forever removed from humanity. Since his pronouncement, the almost unlimited powers and privileges formerly accorded the Islamic clergy have been removed, and their influence is steadily in decline." And The religious authority has always denied the messengers of God. Together with the rulers, they have put to death or sought the death of every one of these messengers. These religious institutions will be symbolized as Babylon in later chapters of Revelation, and their unholy alliance with the rulers will be symbolized as fornication. Verse 11, quote, "And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death." End quote. From Dr. Clark's book, Understanding the Revelation to St. John, page 240, quote, "The corrupt governmental and religious institutions of Persia were responsible for the persecution of the Bab and his followers. They killed the Bab in July 1850 and at least 20,000 of his followers, men, women, and children. Many of his followers endured torture inflicted by mobs which the clergy had worked into fanatical frenzy. The enemies of the faith of God have always been overcome with the testimony of sacrifice. This effect can be seen in the history of Christian persecution. It has again been seen in the Bahá'í faith." Verse 12, quote, "Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." End quote. More on the earth and the sea. Whereas verses 7 to 11 were prophetic of the last days, when the Bab and Baha'u'llah were manifested in the world, this part of the prophecy again returns to the beginning of the Islamic faith in order to once again emphasize the time until the second advent of the Christ. We know this because the 1260-year prophetic period is again prophesied to occur. Woe, as we have seen, is a term which designates the appearance of the messenger of God. In the day of the messenger of God, the devil or dragon appears to oppose him. We have seen in the first verse of this chapter that the dragon appears as a sign in the heaven of the presence of the messenger of God. 2 additional beasts will also arise to oppose the law of God in chapter 13. They will arise from the sea and the earth, the two main divisions of Islam, Sunni and Shia. In some prophecies, as is here in the book of Revelation, the word woe is a reference to a manifestation or prophet of God. This is found in Ezekiel chapter 30, verses 2 and 3, quote, "Son of man, prophesy and say, Thus says the Lord God, Wail, woe to the day, for the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near." A day of the Lord is obviously when the Messiah would come, according to the Old Testament in the book of Malachi, chapter 4, verse 5, quote, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord." In verse 12 it states, "Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea." It is a prophecy of the appearance of a manifestation or prophet of God. The appearance of a prophet of God causes woe due to the conflicts between human-infused practices in the former religion or society and the new laws brought by the new prophet. The dragon or devil appears to oppose a manifestation of God. The second and third beasts that follow the dragon are also the devil, the embodiment of evil. These two beasts also worked their evil deeds against prophets of God and or their followers. Now the phrase, "to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea." Remember this table from before when the meaning of the phrase day and night was explained as meaning Persia and the Ottoman Empire, or the Shia and Sunni branches of Islam, respectively? Well, earth and sea mean the same thing here in chapter 12. Earth refers to Persia, which is predominantly Shia, And the sea refers to the areas of the Middle East that are predominantly Sunni. Now here the meaning of earth and sea are primarily focused on the religious sects, earth being Shia Islam and sea being Sunni Islam. That is because the Sunni branch's leadership was taken over by first the Umayyad clan, then by the Abbasid clan, who were both very corrupt. Thus they corrupted the leadership of Sunni Islam. The Shia branch of Islam followed Muhammad's verbal directive that the leadership of Islam should be passed down by the male descendants of his daughter Fatima and his close spiritual associate Ali, Fatima's husband. This was followed until the year 260 in the Islamic calendar, which was the year 874 in the Gregorian or Western calendar. This line of leadership of the Shia branch ended when the 12th leader of Shia Islam was murdered or otherwise disappeared in that year. All 12 of these Shia leaders, called imams, were murdered, most, if not all, by the order of the Umayyad or Abbasid clan leaders. The bottom line of this verse is that it is stating that a prophet of God would appear and that the second and third woe foretold in Revelation would appear in the earth and the sea, meaning they would arise from and involve these two branches of Islam in these two locations. The earth, meaning in Persia, now called Iran, and in the Sunni Muslim Middle East, the Ottoman Empire at that time. Verses 13 and 14, quote, "And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent." End quote. Remember, the woman in this prophecy symbolizes the law of God. In chapter 12, that is, the law brought by Muhammad. That law was distorted by the rulers who did not follow the leadership design that Muhammad mentioned several times, but unfortunately never had written down, such as in a will. To reiterate that design, Muhammad's plan for successorship regarding the leadership of Islam after his death was that it would be Ali next, then his male descendants through Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, who was Ali's wife, thereafter. When Muhammad died, his successorship plan was not followed. Ali was bypassed, and instead a few men among the more prominent people in the Muslim community selected someone else, a man named Abu Bakr, to be Muhammad's successor as head of the faith. This leader was called the Caliph. Note that the term Caliph means successor. The men that ended up being the caliphs of Islam after Muhammad's death in the Sunni branch did not follow Muhammad's instructions. They were only concerned with wealth and power, not the spiritual condition of Islam and its followers. Note that Ali did become caliph eventually. He was the 4th successor, the 4th caliph, but only for 5 years. He was killed subsequent to a leadership dispute with a man named Muawiyah. Upon Ali's death, Muawiyah became the 5th caliph and set up the Umayyad dynasty of caliphs that survived for 90 years. After the Umayyads took over the caliphate after the death of Ali, they persecuted the descendants of Ali, especially those who became imams, the leaders of the Shia branch of Islam. And remember, this Umayyad dynasty of caliphs that corrupted the leadership of Islam is symbolized by the red dragon of the book of Revelation. Now we get to that last mention in verse 14, stating that the woman, the law of God, of Muhammad, flees into the wilderness for a time, times, and half a time. Hopefully you recall this table from earlier in this video, wherein all the time prophecy terms in the left column were explained, And as shown in the far right column, they all mean the exact same length of time, which starts at the same year and ends in the same year, which is 1844. This term, time, times, and half a time, is in row number 1. It means 1260 prophetic days, which equals 1260 actual lunar years on Earth. Here's that timeline again that shows the beginning point of the 1260 lunar year period, which is the first year of the Islamic calendar, which is the year 622 in the Gregorian or Western calendar. As you see, it is to be fulfilled in the year 1844 Common Era, which it was by the proclamation of the Bab of his divine identity and purpose in May of 1844. Warning, warning to all viewers. Please do not consider Islam as a personal expression of faith by individual Muslims as being the beast, or that all Muslims are the beast or corrupt. Baha'u'llah has assured us that the Quran, the holy book of Islam, was not corrupted, although some interpretations of the text may be in error. An example of that is that phrase, seal of the prophets. It has been interpreted as meaning that there would be no more manifestations of God after Muhammad. Baha'u'llah states that Muhammad was indeed the seal of the prophets, but that it does not mean that there would not be any other prophets after him. It was the leadership of Islam that was corrupted, not individual practitioners, unless, of course, the individual is following the orders or examples of corrupt leaders. The leadership being corrupted resulted in the diminished spiritual power of Islam. Each individual Muslim will be judged on his or her individual conformance with the Quran's teachings, not judged as corrupt as a whole. Verses 15 and 16, quote, "And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth." End quote. Just how did the earth help the woman? The earth is Persia, just as it is symbolized in several previous prophetic verses. Persia changed its name to Iran in the year 1935, by the way. History has shown how Muhammad's verbal directive about who should succeed him as head of the faith was only followed, initially, in the Shia branch of Islam, which became centered in Persia. Persia served as a refuge for the law of God, the woman, at least for the first 260 lunar years that the Shia imams guided the believers. They were the descendants of Ali and Muhammad, if you recall. Persia, Iran, was and is predominantly Shia. Dr. Clark provides some explanation on page 242 of his book. Quote, "The Umayyads, jealously guarding their power, thought to destroy the offspring of Muhammad, that is, any descendant of Ali who could rightly claim the successorship. Just as God parted the Red Sea and allowed the Hebrews to cross in safety, God has commanded that the attempt by the corrupt caliphate to exterminate the seed of Muhammad would be in vain. The Bab was a descendant of Ali through his son Hussein. The promised return of the 12th Imam was fulfilled with the appearance of the Bab. The caliphate, like Herod, failed in their attempt to thwart God's purpose through systematic murder." End quote. Verse 17, quote, "And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." End quote. Note that the word wroth means, in modern English, angry or wrathful. So the dragon was angry with the woman. As to that phrase about the dragon making war with the offspring of the woman, the law of God, meaning Islam, The Umayyad caliphs, and after them the Abbasid clan dynasty of caliphs, persecuted the descendants of Muhammad through Ali by methods up to and including by murder. All 11, perhaps all 12 of the Imams who were descendants of Ali were murdered. The 12th Imam, the last Imam of the descent of Muhammad and Ali, disappeared apparently at the age of 5 after the death of the 11th Imam. There is a Shia prophecy that this missing 12th Imam would return as the Redeemer of Islam, called the Mahdi or Qaim. The Bab fulfilled this prophecy. He was a descendant of Muhammad. Back in verse 4 of chapter 12 it states, "And his tail of the dragon drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to earth." That phrase means that the Umayyad, the dragon, killed a third of the descendants of Muhammad, the stars of heaven. Truly a war on Muhammad's offspring. Chapter 13 starts now. We open chapter 13 with a short commentary and a couple nuggets of information to keep in mind as we go through chapter 13. In chapter 12 of Revelation, the symbolic fiery red dragon, which had 7 heads and 10 horns, was introduced. It was revealed that the dragon represents a kingdom. The 7 heads indicate 7 dominions which comprise that kingdom. The 10 horns which appear on the heads of the dragon reflect the names of the kings who ruled the kingdom. In the 20th chapter of the book of Revelation, the dragon is called Satan, the enemy of God. Thus, the appearance of a dragon in the prophecy depicts kings who are the enemies of God. The dragon can represent a mortal king to whom God is opposed, is seen in Ezekiel chapter 29, verse 3, which reads, quote, "I am against thee, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lieth in the midst of his rivers, which hath said, My river is mine own, and I have made it for myself." End quote. Type of beast defines the type of earthly king or kingdom the verse is referencing. For instance, a lamb is a meek, humble king or kingdom. A serpent is a cold-blooded, often venomous king or kingdom. A dragon is a large serpent, thus a large, powerful, venomous, and evil king or kingdom. The fiery red color of the dragon declares its sinful nature. See that in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 18, and Revelation chapter 17, verse 3. The dragon thus represents certain kings who may be described as cold-blooded, sinful, powerful, and guilty of murder. In the context of chapter 12, the dragon signifies kings who arose to oppose Muhammad, pervert his laws and teachings, slay his chosen successors, and seduce his followers to ignore the spiritual path bequeathed to humanity in the Quran. Abu Sufyan was the emir of Mecca and head of the Umayyad clan. He was present among the first delegation sent by the people of Mecca to dissuade Muhammad from teaching his faith. Mecca was the center of idol worshiping. Economically, it was dependent on the pilgrims that visited Mecca on the pilgrimages to worship the idols. Muhammad taught there was only one God. Later, Abu Sufyan personally led 2 armed forces against Muhammad at Medina and strove to destroy the newly born monotheistic religion. Abu Sufyan and his son Muawiyah opposed the messenger of God until it became clear that Muhammad's forces would take Mecca. At that juncture, they professed conversion to his faith. However, their opposition to the cause of God and Muhammad never abated. Their sole desire was to regain the power and authority they lost when Muhammad destroyed the lucrative practice of idol worship in Mecca. Muawiyah, the son of Abu Sufyan, seized the caliphate in the year 661 Common Era through treachery, which led to the death of Ali. Ever fearful that a true successor from the line of Muhammad might arise, Muawiyah and his successors constantly searched the political landscape for signs that one of Ali's descendants might demonstrate a divinely inspired capacity for leadership. Over the years, there were 12 such holy souls. They were called imams in the Shia branch of Islam and were likened to 12 radiant stars. See Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. Whenever an imam came to prominence, the Umayyad and later the Abbasids had him killed. The dragon was said to arise as a sign in heaven. The coming of every messenger of God is heralded by heavenly signs. Some examples include the Star of Bethlehem. We all know about this sign of the coming of Jesus Christ. King Herod was a sign in heaven too. He sought to eliminate the Messiah by killing every male infant in the realm. It's reminiscent of the 10th plague that Moses called down upon Egypt to let his people go, that of all the firstborn children of the Egyptians died. That should have sparked some spiritual questioning on the part of the Jewish people. Then there was the appearance of the Umayyad, the red dragon. The rebellion of the Umayyad against a proclaimed prophet of God was the sign in heaven. Whenever a manifestation of God appears on earth, his opposition arises. This opposition is therefore a sign in heaven. Such opposition tells us that we need to look into the cause of their opposition. By investigating such signs, the truth can be revealed to us and we can find God's message to us, meaning his prophet, his teachings for the new dispensation. This is the timeline of the appearances of the 3 bad beasts of Revelation. We've already discussed beast number 1, the Umayyads. Here at the beginning of chapter 13, we are introduced to beast number 2, which arises out of the sea. Beast number 2 is the Islamic kings of the Abbasid dynasty of Sunni caliphs. Verses 1 through about verse 10 in chapter 13 provides some insight into these despicable characters. The Abbasid clan murdered the Umayyad leaders and took over their empire. Their dynasty lasted about 508 years, from the year 750 Common Era to 1258 Common Era, when the invasion of the Mongols put an end to them. Beasts number 1 and 2 had direct negative effects on the leadership of Islam. Note that the evil intentions of beast number 1 created the other 2 beasts by means of what they did to the leadership of Islam to begin with. These problems sown by beasts 1 and 2 carried on to and through beast number 3. There is a large gap in time between the end of beast 2 and the arrival of beast number 3, almost 600 years. Beast number 3 at the right of the slide begins its nefarious actions in the year 1844, that year when the 1260 days, which means 1260 lunar years, end. That is the year when the Lamb, the Bab, begins his earthly dispensation in Persia. So beast number 3 arises to spiritually war with the new manifestations of God expected in 1844 and after. The year 1863, when Baha'u'llah declared that he was the one prophesied in the Bible and by the Bab as being the promised one of the ages, the returned Christ Spirit foretold in Revelation as he who sits on the throne. Here's a brief review just to help this information sink in. The 3 bad beasts appear sequentially. The red dragon, the Umayyads, appear first on the left there. Then the second beast is they murdered the Umayyads and the first beast and took over their empire. Many, many years later, the third beast with two horns, meaning two kings, arose from the earth, meaning from Persia, to persecute the two prophets of God, the Lamb and he who sits on the throne of the book of Revelation. The text states it had two horns like a lamb, but it does not say it was a lamb, although I've pictured it here as a lamb. This like a lamb has only one head with two horns, meaning a nation of one dominion, not multiple sections. Horns signify kings, therefore there would be two kings of special importance in the fulfillment of the prophecy in chapter 13. But remember, this third beast spoke like a dragon. In effect, it was the dragon, the first beast. And it was as vicious and venomous as that first beast, the red dragon in its persecution of the Lamb and he who sits on the throne of Revelation. This third beast, the two Persian kings, would be the beast whose name was 666. In this chapter 13, we shall see that the three beasts clearly foretell three groups of kings who were to rule the nations of Islam until the appearance of the returned Christ Spirit. Just as the kings of the Umayyad and Abbasid planned and plotted to thwart the cause of God, these two Persian kings would attempt to destroy every trace of the returned Christ and his new faith. Chapter 13, verses 1 and 2, quote, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority." End quote. So a new beast rises out of the sea. This is the second of the 3 bad beasts of the book of Revelation. This beast has 7 heads and 10 horns like the dragon, but it is not the dragon. The new beast was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as of a bear, with mouth of a lion. What is the significance of this new beast rising up out of the sea, you might ask? The small map in the upper right-hand corner, bordered in blue, shows the Middle East. The small red rectangle within that blue border is then enlarged here to show Babylonia, with a blue arrow pointing to the ancient city of Babylon, which was on the Euphrates River. This is the area that the book of Isaiah describes as the wilderness of the sea, the city of Babylon and the surrounding area called Babylonia. The city of Baghdad was not founded until the year 762 Common Era, some 1300 years after the demise of Babylon. The ruins of Babylon are 55 miles south of Baghdad, in the same territory, basically. Why do I mention Baghdad? That was the seat of the second beast. The first beast, the red dragon, which symbolizes the Umayyad dynasty of Sunni caliphs of the Islamic Empire, was headquartered in Damascus, Syria. But the dynasty of this second beast moved that headquarters, the seat of the empire, to Baghdad, which was in the wilderness of the sea. Thus, this new beast arises up out of the sea, the area around ancient Babylon. These are 2 verses from the book of Isaiah that defines what the desert or wilderness of the sea means geographically. They are chapter 21, verses 1 and 9. Quote, "The burden of the desert or wilderness of the sea, as whirlwinds in the south pass through, so it cometh from the desert, from a terrible land." And verse 9, "And behold, Here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. And he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. End quotes. There are numerous verses in between the first and the ninth, but just to save time, the essential two verses are the only ones included. They are what define the meaning of the term desert or wilderness of the sea. Some translations of the Bible into English use the term desert of the sea, others wilderness of the sea. But geographically speaking, it's the area of Babylon and Babylonia. Then there's the phrase from the second verse, quote, And the dragon gave him, the second beast, his power, and his seat, and great authority. End quote. The second beast symbolizes the Abbasid clan, who murdered the Umayyad leaders in a mass execution and took their dominions and power from them, just as reflected in the second verse. The Abbasid clan then set up their own dynasty of Sunni caliphs that then ruled those 7 dominions of the Sunni Islamic Empire with equal corruption and violence, equal to that of the Red Dragon. The terms heads and horns have special meanings, if you recall from chapter 12, the video. Verse 2 of chapter 13 again mentions having this new beast number 2 having 7 heads and 10 horns. By heads is meant the number of countries or dominions over which this beast number 2 wields power. So this both the dragon and the second beast having 7 heads mean they both have 7 dominions within the empire. That's because it's the same empire. The Abbasids murdered the Umayyads and took over the store, so to speak, the whole empire. By the number of horns is meant the number of the names of the kings or emperors of concern in the prophecy. So the second beast, again, has 10 different names, not the same as for the red dragon, obviously. But still, it's the 10 different names of the rulers. A crown, I should mention that when we get to the third beast, which appears in verse 11, later on in this chapter, it mentions that that beast coming up out of the earth had 2 horns. That means there would be 2 kings of that beast, which will be important in that part of the prophecy. And then a crown is a symbol of reward and or authority. This map shows those 7 dominions of the Islamic Empire under bad beasts number 1 and 2 of the book of Revelation. These 7 dominions are shaded in various colors. The light gray areas surrounding it were not part of the dominions under the first 2 bad beasts during these times. The red bordered legend in the bottom left corner shows a number for each of those 7 dominions on the map by the referenced numbers. Note that the white borders on the map are modern-day national boundaries, not in existence at the time of the Islamic Empire, which changed its configurations throughout the centuries after the first caliph, after the death of Muhammad in the year 632 Common Era. For beast number 1, the red dragon, the 10 horns represent the 10 names of the leaders of the Umayyads. Some names are repeated in the persons of successive leaders, but the 10 names are here. I won't read them to you. An example of there being multiples, if you look at Muawiyah, the second there were 2 of them and 3 of Yazid's. So there were more than 10 leaders of the Umayyads who were caliphs. But if you remove the duplicate names, there were 10 names. So the same 7 dominions apply to the second beast from the first beast. But here you see the 10 names of the Abbasid, the second beast, dynasty kings. I won't read them to you, but I'll point out that the number 1 there, Asafa, that means the shedder of blood, to give you an idea of how he was. He was the horn that arose after the other 10 horns in the beast with 10 horns in Daniel chapter 7, verses 23 and 24. This horn, this king that arose after these original 10 horns on the beast, subdued 3 kings. If you're interested in that, there is another video of mine called The Book of Daniel Part 3, and I'll put some information in the description of this video if you wish to find it and watch it. Dr. Clark, in his book Understanding the Revelation to St. John, explained the history of the ending years of the Abbasid clan's heading of the Sunni Islamic Empire. Quote, "Some historians may point out that the Abbasid Caliphate continued until al-Mustasim Billah, the 37th Caliph of the House of Abbas." That's the Abbasid clan. He was killed by Hulagu, the Mongol ruler, in 1258 Common Era, when the Mongols invaded that part of the world. At this point, the Abbasid Caliphate was completely terminated. However, it should be understood that between the 10th and the 37th Abbasid Caliph, the true power rested in the hands of others. End quote. Additionally, this account from a historian, H.M. Balyuzi, from his book Muhammad and the Course of Islam, page 233, quote, Mutawakil, he was number 10 on the list of the names of Abbasid caliphs, was killed in December 861 Common Era through the intrigues of his Turkish general Buga. With his death, the effective power of the Abbasids also expired. Occasionally a caliph would show a semblance of authority and no more. Power was in other hands. The Turks, having once tasted the fruits of success, would not peacefully give up the positions which they had attained and killed one caliph after another. The person of the caliph was no longer sacrosanct. End quote. Dr. Clark mentions in his book on page 255, quote, "Once the Abbasids became no more than figureheads of Turkish rule, effectively devoid of any power, they stopped being counted as kings. As the beast is the symbol of a king, only the first 10 Abbasid rulers are described in the vision. This is why the beast has only 10 horns." It is mentioned in verse 1 that, quote, "upon his heads the name of blasphemy." So what about blasphemy? Well, this is another quote from Dr. Clark's book explaining this. Quote, "The crowns upon the horns identify kings, but their sovereignty was not spiritual kingship, for upon these heads was written the name of blasphemy. The Umayyad and Abbasid kings bore the title Caliph, or successor. It signified that they were the true spiritual successors of Muhammad. Robert Riggs, in his book, The Apocalypse Unsealed, pointed out that to bear such a name is blasphemous because they, the Abbasid caliphs, murdered the true successors of Muhammad, the Imams." End quote. A note here, the first 11 Imams were the leaders of the Shia branch of Islam, who were descendants of Muhammad through his daughter Fatima and her husband Ali. Ali was the first Imam after Muhammad's death in 632 Common Era. Verses 3 and 4, quote, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" End quote. An explanation of this clause of verse 3, quote, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed." End quote. The capital of the Umayyad dynasty of caliphs was in Damascus, Syria, one of the 7 dominions or heads of the Dragon's Empire. When the Abbasids, the second beast, took over the empire, they rejected Damascus and moved their capital to Baghdad. Thus the Syrian dominion was wounded by the violent overthrow of the Umayyads and the subsequent loss of the capital status to Baghdad. One of the Umayyad escaped the mass murder of the Abbasids. The Abbasids mass murdered the Umayyad leaders. So one of those Umayyad escaped to Spain and set up a separate Umayyad dominion. It lasted for 300 years, meaning the wound to that head of the beast was healed. Then in verse 4, quote, "And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" End quote. Dr. Clark provides this explanation, quote, "Recalling the appearance in the 6th chapter of the book of Revelation of the pale horse, whose rider was called Death, it should be noted that the horse and rider represented a false religion. This false religion is again depicted in chapter 13, verse 4, where the dragon is worshipped. Because the people chose to follow a self-appointed religious authority rather than the spiritual guides which Muhammad had instructed them to follow, the people are depicted as turning to a man-made idol rather than to God. Such practice is the cause of spiritual death." End quote. Think of it all in light of our modern times. Think of how so many people these days get caught up in idolizing wealthy and powerful people. Many confuse the acquisition of wealth as being a sign from God, that those individuals have a special place in God's eyes, and that having wealth is indicative of special intelligence, and that intelligence is equal to wisdom. Just a note here to help eliminate these myths, that in the USA at this time, 60% of wealthy people inherited their wealth. So being wealthy does not automatically mean you earned it from your own efforts. Think of all the people who are so willing these days to have the wealthy run not only businesses, but also government, the economy, schools, and even religious organizations. We can see some people following individuals or groups primarily due to their wealth and power status, somehow thinking these wealthy, powerful people will advocate for them, perhaps thinking that their boats will float too when the wealthy have their way in how our society is designed and ruled. Then there's also fear of those in power when their power is used for vengeance and control and the average person has no power to counter it. In regards to the second beast's conquering of the Umayyad Empire, the common folk had a choice between following the corrupted version of Islam headed by these usurpers of the leadership of Islam, or they could follow the spiritual teachings of the pure Islam. Many chose to follow the corrupt leadership solely for their own material gain, hopes of wealth and power. Those who followed the first beast, the dragon, would likely easily switch their worship to that beast to the second beast. Verses 5 and 6, quote, "And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell there in heaven." End quote. In verse 5, it states that power was given to this second beast for 42 months. 42 months equals 42 times 30 prophetic days in a prophetic month equals 1260 days, which equals 1260 lunar years. The result is in lunar years because this prophecy is about Muhammad's revelation. Islam has a lunar calendar. and thus this would be in lunar years. The time period of 1260 is given in several different Bible time prophecy terms, as we see here in this table in the column on the right. The three columns headings are the Bible time prophecy term is in the first column, then the math is given in the middle column, and the meaning is in the right column labeled lunar years. That's lunar, not Gregorian solar years, because, as mentioned, all these time prophecies concern happenings in the Islamic dispensation of Muhammad. And remember, Bible scholars agree that in Bible time prophecies, a day in prophecy equals a year to us humans on planet Earth. The 42 months mentioned in verse 5 of chapter 13 is in the second row from the top. Note that all these terms on the left are equal in length in terms of Earth years, lunar years, on Earth, and they are all the same period of time. They start at the same time and end, that is, are fulfilled and bear fruit in the same Earth year. Here you see again those time prophecy terms in the left column. But here you see where those terms are used in either the book of Revelation and or in the book of Daniel. There are many similarities in the time prophecies and imagery between Revelation and Daniel. All these terms in the left column, found in Bible time prophecies in Daniel and Revelation, mean the exact same period of time, 1260 Earth lunar years. This timeline begins on the left at year 500 of the Gregorian or Western calendar. Muhammad began teaching his revelation from God around the year 613 Common Era. Muhammad chose a calendar for all Islam as a lunar calendar that began in the year 622 Common Era, when he had to flee Mecca and go to Medina due to murderous threats against his life. The beginning of the Islamic calendar is now shown on the left as it relates to the Gregorian calendar. The 1260-day prophecy of the duration of the Quranic dispensation begins with the start of the calendar in that year 622 Common Era. Because it's a lunar calendar, we must add 1260 lunar years, which gets us to the Gregorian year of 1844 Common Era that you see at the bottom right corner. That leads to the question, did anything happen in 1844 of consequence, you may ask? You've seen this illustration before that shows when the three bad beasts appeared in the world. Now I've added where those 1260 lunar years fit in here. Verses 7 and 8, quote, "And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." End quote. Regarding making war with the saints were the male descendants of Muhammad through his daughter Fatima and her husband Ali. These were the imams who were designated as Muhammad's successors. Ali was the first imam, according to Muhammad. Ali was to be his direct successor as head of his faith, Islam, then Ali's male descendants thereafter. Those who followed this verbal directive of Muhammad then became known as the Shia branch of Islam. Those who did not follow this successorship directive and selected other people to become the successor they called a caliph were then considered to be in the Sunni branch of Islam. There were 11 imams after Muhammad's death in 632 Common Era. Then the 12th was killed or disappeared at maybe around the age of 5 after the death of his father, who was apparently the 11th imam. This happened in the year 874 Common Era, which was year 260 in the Islamic calendar. The prophecy of the 12th Imam grew out of these events. The prophecy was that this 12th Imam, who disappeared, or unknown exactly what happened to him, that this 12th Imam would return in the future to redeem Islam. This entity is referred to as the Mahdi, which means the guided one, or the Qaim, which means he who shall arise. The Bab was this entity. Between the first beast, the red dragon, and the second beast, they killed every one of those 12 Imams of the lineage of Ali and Muhammad. Here are Dr. Clarke's remarks about those who worship the beast, which is true of any of these 3 beasts. Quote, "Those who worshipped the beast, that is, supported the wrongful government of the caliphate, did so because of the material gain which was thus afforded them. Those who choose the life of the material world over the spiritual have in fact chosen death. The book of life is the heavenly record of those souls who have chosen the life of the Spirit and have recognized and obeyed the messenger of God." Verses 9 and 10, quote, "If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints." End quote. Then there's the directives in verse 10 that he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivities, and he that killeth with the sword must be killed by the sword. Looking at the history of the caliphs and other non-sanctioned leaders of Islam, this has been fulfilled. So many of the caliphs used killing to get more power and wealth, and many of them suffered death by violence or were deposed. As Dr. Clarke stated in his book, quote, "The Umayyad rose to power through murder and lost their power to murderers, the Abbasids. The Abbasids murdered the Umayyad to gain their power, and power was seized from them by the Turks." End quote. The lesson is not just for Islam. In any of God's faith, if the prophet founder gave instructions, they must be followed. Not following the guidance of the prophet founder would wound the faith that the followers purport to serve. This includes Judaism and Christianity, and the Bahá'í faith, for that matter. The new Messiah, Baha'u'llah, left written instructions as to the leadership of his faith, the Bahá'í faith, after his passing. His followers have adhered to his written instructions concerning who would lead and administer his faith. It's interesting to note that there is no clergy in the Bahá'í faith. Verse 11, quote, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." End quote. In verse 11, it states that this new, third, despicable beast would come up out of the earth. This means that the beast will arise from Persia. How do we know that? There are several sources or origins of this meaning that the word earth in some prophecies means Persia. One of the origins goes back to the book of Daniel, chapter 2, wherein Daniel helps King Nebuchadnezzar find out what his dream of a statue meant. This statue Nebuchadnezzar saw in a dream had legs of iron and feet of a mixture of iron and clay. Those feet symbolized the future branches of Islam, the Sunni and Shia, and the Ottoman Empire and Persia, respectively. The Ottoman Empire was predominantly Sunni, and Persia predominantly Shia. If you want to know more about the true meaning of Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue, see my video titled "Interpretations of Nebuchadnezzar's Statue Are Wrong." In Revelation chapter 12, the dragon spewed water out of its mouth to persecute the woman. The woman was saved when the earth, Persia, swallowed up that water. This is the history of Shia Islam getting refuge in Persia when the schism developed between the Shia and the Sunni branches of Islam. To this day, Iran, the former Persia, is predominantly Shia, and the former territories of the Ottoman Empire are predominantly Sunni. Another source of this interpretation is the Messiah for this new era himself. Baha'u'llah did not keep it a secret that he was God's latest manifestation. He announced who he was and his mission from God by sending some letters or tablets to some of the most powerful kings and rulers on the planet at that time to announce to them exactly who he was and what he wanted them to do. Those tablets that Baha'u'llah sent to specific kings and rulers included those rulers you see here. Starting at the top left was Tsar Alexander II of Russia. Then to the right, Kaiser Wilhelm I of Prussia, Nasir-Din Shah of Persia, Pope Pius IX, and the bottom left to right, starting with Sultan Abdul-Aziz of the Ottoman Empire, Queen Victoria, and Emperor Napoleon III of France. Baha'u'llah addressed these tablets to these and other rulers by such terms as, O Tsar of Russia, O Queen in London, O thou King of Berlin, O King of Paris. And to the Shah of Persia, he addressed that tablet to, O King of the earth. No other ruler did he address as the ruler of earth. Beast number 3 appears in Persia. So, what is the significance of this third beast appearing in our vision story, and what is the significance of it appearing in Persia? The reason we care about this beast is that he will oppose the divine Lamb of Revelation when he appears in Persia. If we know when and where the beast will appear, it will help us identify the Lamb when he appears. From all this information that we've reviewed, we know the date for the appearances of the Lamb and the beast as 1844, and we know the place, Persia. Now we have a beast that is like a lamb in the book of Revelation. Is this the same lamb as mentioned earlier in Revelation? The answer is no. There is only one reference to an earthly king, a beast that was like a lamb. That's lamb with a small case L, out of the 27 mentions in the book of Revelation. And that is here in chapter 13, verse 1. In the text of most English Bibles, one type of lamb has a capital letter L in the text and the other has a small case L. The lamb with the capital L means a spiritual or divine king, meaning a manifestation of God, also known as a prophet of God or messenger of God. Note the capital L in lamb and the capital K in king. The other, like a lamb, with a small case L, means earthly, 100% human king, a small case L denoting a human king, small k king, not a divine king with a capital K. Who was to be the Lamb, capital L, of Revelation? Many Christians might consider this a reference to Jesus Christ. After all, several verses in the New Testament call Jesus the Lamb of God. However, in the book of Revelation, the Lamb is the future Elijah figure who would be the announcer and forerunner of the Messiah, who is called He who sits on the throne. The Lamb of Revelation is the return of the Christ Spirit in the station of Elijah, who would appear before the Messiah. Eli's coming, so says the Old Testament in Malachi chapter 4, verse 5, quote, Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, end quote. The great and dreadful day of the Lord, the phrase underlined in the verse, means the coming of the Messiah in the latter days, since the speaker here is the Lord of hosts, the Messiah, the glory of God. Then we have the book of Luke, chapter 9, verse 26 for a clue. Quote, and Jesus is speaking here, "For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he shall come in his own glory, and in his Father's, and of the holy angels." End quote. But let's break down this verse grammatically so we can see its hidden message. For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he shall come, number 1, in his own glory, and number 2, in his Father's glory, and of the holy angels. End quote. The first clause, in his own glory, is speaking of his return as the forerunner. Then the second clause, in his Father's glory, as the glory of God, is his return as he who sits on the throne mentioned in the book of Revelation, also known as the glory of the Father, or the glory of God, or the glory of the Lord, the Messiah, and the return of the Christ Spirit. The tag at the end, and of the holy angels, is reminiscent of chapter 19 of the book of Revelation, verses 11 through 14, wherein the Messiah arrives. Then in verse 14, his armies, which were in heaven, followed him upon white horses, that reference to holy angels. Bottom line, Jesus Christ said he would return twice in 2 different capacities, as reflected in this verse from Luke. Beast number 3 had 2 horns, and was compared to a lamb, yet it spoke like a dragon. Horns in prophetic visions signify kings. Thus the Lamb, the nation or empire, will have 2 kings of special import in the events of the prophecy. Spake as a dragon means they would govern with the evil and venom of beast number 1, the red dragon of the Umayyads. Persia in the mid to late 1800s was very weak, thus it was compared to a lamb. Verse 12, quote, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. End quote. Dr. Clark in his book explains the worshiping of the first beast. Quote, the government of these 2 kings of Persia was based upon the same quest for wealth, power, and sensuality that the Umayyads sought to achieve through conquest, treachery, intrigue, and murder. Their rule was marred by an abuse of power at every official level, each seeking his own personal advancement through extortion of gifts from those of lesser rank. These Persian kings, who speak like the dragon, used all the power of the first beast to obscure the light of the new revelation from God. That's the Bab's faith, called the Bahá'í faith. These corrupt political leaders, like the Umayyads before them, were intent on destroying the new faith of God through their efforts. The eyes of most of their subjects were blinded to the dawn of that new faith. End quote from Dr. Clark's book. The bottom line is that what they worshipped was the idol of materialism and worldly power. Verse 13, quote, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. End quote. What to make of this, he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men? This is an allusion to the Hebrew prophet Elijah, when he challenged 450 priests of idol-worshipping groups to call upon their gods to bring fire down from the sky to burn their offerings on altars built on Mount Carmel in ancient Israel. See in the Bible, 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 19 through 40. The gods of the idol worshippers failed, whereas Elijah was successful in having the Hebrew God send fire down to burn Elijah's offering. Elijah proved that the gods of the idol worshippers were figments of the imagination of humans, whereas the Hebrew God was proven to be real. But in verse 13, the opposite happens in that the beast, the promulgator of idol worship, the love of material wealth and power, these idol worshippers successfully bring down the fire, and the true sacrifice, the prophet, is slain, meaning the Lamb of Revelation, the Bab, is killed. Dr. Clark provides this explanation on page 262 of his book, quote, "The prophet and the sacrifice in this case was the Bab. It was Nasir Din who, while still a prince, presided over the trial of the Bab in Tabriz. When Nasir Din was Shah, his prime minister Mirza Taqi Khan arranged the execution of the Bab. After being suspended in the public square of the barracks, the Bab was executed by a firing squad of 750 muskets. The fire of these muskets virtually consumed the flesh of the Bab, the sacrificial lamb. Thus the false god of this king, beast, appeared to be victorious in the eyes of the people." End quote. Verses 14 and 15, quote, "And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." End quote. Dr. Clark's comments, quote, "To give life to the image of the beast so that it could speak and cause many to be killed signifies a government carved out of the same tyrannic, murderous spirit as the Umayya. As the Umayya opposed Muhammad and his chosen successors, so too did the Persian kings oppose God's messengers for today." Another reason for the portrayal of the image of the beast is to remind the reader or viewer of events described in the book of Daniel. There, the story is told of Nebuchadnezzar, who had an image made and commanded every person to bow down to that image. As in the above verse, refusal to do so resulted in the penalty of death. The reason for this similarity will become clear shortly. Verses 16 and 17, quote, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." End quote. The explanations of these verses are very complex. One reason for this complexity is due to there being a plethora of interpretations of this prophecy that are very well known and mostly incorrect. These interpretations usually involve rather bizarre scenarios. The real explanations are very much tamer, and people just seem to like the more bizarre interpretations rather than the logical ones. Another cause of difficulty in deciphering these verses is the lack of awareness of many people of the history of Islam and the Middle East, and outright vehement rejection of Muhammad being a prophet of God, and other prejudices against Islam and its adherents. Here are just some theories that people have conjured up about what the mark of the beast is, or will be, supposedly. On the left, the theory that a chip would be embedded into everyone's forehead. This illustration also includes the fear that barcodes are the mark. Upper and lower center, a drawing depicting how 666, the number of the beast, will be stamped or tattooed or even branded into the skin of those under the control of the beast. On the right shows a barcode, it being the theorized mark of the beast, tattooed on the forehead. But do not fear, none of these are correct. A note here to think about as we proceed discussing the mark of the beast. About this phrase, in their foreheads, the verse states to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. What is in their foreheads? Their brains. Back around the year 95 Common Era, when Revelation was written, people did not know much about the brain, but they knew its importance. If someone got a serious injury to their forehead, severe disturbance of mental abilities, sense of self and identity, and awareness of the world around them might result. The eyes, just below the forehead, allow us to see the world around us. The forehead helps us understand what we see. The mark in the forehead may simply be how our thinking and beliefs are impacted by the actions of the beast. Whether we choose to follow the beast or the new prophets of God is what's indicated here. Just keep this in mind when you hear the phrase, in their foreheads. I will be delving into the meaning of Mark of the Beast, just forewarning y'all that it will take a little time in this video to review. Your patience is requested. Just remember it should answer your questions about the Mark of the Beast. Mostly it will be quotes from Dr. Clarke's book, starting on page 263 of this book. Quote, "These two verses hold important clues to the identity of the beast. The first verse stresses the nearly universal application of the mark. This is an important point to remember. The second verse stresses that without the mark or the name or the number of the name of the beast, no one could buy or sell. This is also important. So, what is the mark? The mark on the hand or on the forehead has been hypothesized to either be the jizya tax, the head or poll tax, or the kharja, the work tax, as work is usually done with the right hand. The poll tax was paid by non-Muslims living in Islamic territories who chose not to convert. The kharja, or work tax, was initially a fee paid by recent converts to Islam. Pictured here are two jizya tattoos, one on the forehead, one on the wrist, and I don't believe this is done at all anymore. It was imposed on such landholders in the form of a tithe, consisting of a tenth of the harvest. By payment of these taxes, those who chose not to convert and those who chose Islam as their new faith were able to do business in Islamic lands. According to this theory, payment of these taxes amounted to being marked by the beast. In later verses, the mark of the beast is contrasted to the mark which God will place on the foreheads of his followers. Such a mark is a spiritual attribute, as Jesus also received the mark of God, although no outward mark was visible. Such a mark represents the quality of the soul, which can be distinguished by the facial countenance of the individual, or which can be determined by the work of his hands. Baha'u'llah has written, "Thus the peoples of the world are judged by their countenance. By it their misbelief, their faith, and their iniquity are all made manifest." That's from his book, the Kitab-i-Igan, which means the Book of Certitude. This is supported in the book of Isaiah, chapter 3, verse 9, quote, "The look upon their countenance witnesses against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom," end quote. Now we come to why the nearly universal application of the mark of the beast is important. The beast, speaking and acting like the dragon, opposes the messengers of God. Thus, loyal subjects of the king will also oppose those messengers. As in the days of Jesus, of all the Jews, only 12 believed that he was the Christ, and of those one, succumbing to pressure, betrayed him. The vast majority of Jews, following the example of their leaders, denied him. In the same way, the vast majority of the Persian people, following the example of their king, denied the Bab and Baha'u'llah. As their allegiance was to their mortal king, they are described as marked with his name. In the next chapter, those whose allegiance is to the returned Christ are marked with the name of the Heavenly Father. What is the importance of the statement that no man could buy or sell except those with the mark or name or number of the beast? It will be seen that the number of the beast refers to gold. Gold is the ultimate standard by which the things of this world are bought and sold. However, the buying and selling spoken of in this prophecy pertains to the world of religion. Over time, the commemorations of the pure faith become a vehicle for merchandising. The degradation of the spiritual nature of Christmas is a notable example. Jesus cleansed the Jerusalem temple, saying, "Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise." That's from John chapter 2, verse 16. In Revelation chapter 18, verses 11 to 19, the final removal of such merchandising from the religion of God is celebrated. According to the words of Jesus, God does not wish us to be preoccupied with mundane concerns. That is from the book of Luke, chapter 12, verses 22 and 23, quote, "And he said to his disciple, 'Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, nor about the body, what you put on. Life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing.'" End quote. Luke chapter 12, verses 22 and 23. The buying and selling that we should be occupied with concerns the things of the Spirit, which is to say, divine truth. This is from Proverbs 23, verse 23, quote, "Buy the truth, and do not sell it. Also wisdom, instruction, and understanding." End quote. When Jesus described the kingdom of heaven, he likened it to a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. That's from Matthew chapter 13, verse 46. To believe in the Christ, one must sell all that he owns, such as his preconceptions about the manner in which the Christ will appear, his social attachments, such as to family, friends, and church leaders, who may turn against him for his belief. Such purchase is made without money. It is made with the Spirit. And this from the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 1 and 2, quote, "Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Yes, come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and let your soul delight itself in abundance." End of quotes from Dr. Clark's book. The gist of it is that God offers divine truth without price. In contrast, the beast seeks to spread falsehood with gold. That was an excellent and thorough explanation by Dr. Clark. From my own study and meditation on this question, I've arrived at a simpler explanation, added to Dr. Clark's, not in place of it. I think I've simply distilled Dr. Clark's down to its core meaning. That explanation is, the mark of the beast is corruption. Corruption of religion is the primary concern in the book of Revelation, but also corruption in general society, since corruption of religion would affect every aspect of society. Verse 18, the last verse in chapter 13, quote, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. End quote. There it is, that infamous number 666. After all this discussion about beast number 3, the one from Persia, mind you, what the heck was the purpose of giving this beast a number, 666? After all, the previous 2 bad beasts were not assigned numbers. It all goes back to the entire purpose of these verses of chapter 13 of the book of Revelation. And that purpose is to help us identify when and where the Christ Spirit will return. If we find out where and when these 2 kings of Persia appear, it will help us identify the manifestations of God who would appear in their vicinity during their reigns. Let's look at that first sentence. It's a major clue. Quote, "Here is wisdom." Who or what in the Bible is known for wisdom? Why look elsewhere in the Bible? In any Bible prophecy, your first step to discern its meaning should be to find other clues in the Bible, if there are any, that may have an intersection with the term or reference in the prophecy you're looking at. It can help define terms. Prophecies often use the same or similar terms. The answer to our query? King Solomon, of course, was the most renowned person in the Bible for his wisdom. There are several Bible verses touting the wisdom of Solomon. Here are just some of them from 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 29 through 31. As just a sample. Quote, "And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much, and largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, and his fame was in all nations round about." End quote. So, did King Solomon have anything to do with the number 666 elsewhere in the Bible? Yes, there is an intersection of Solomon and the number 666 in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 10, verse 14. Quote, "The weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold." End quote. Our intersection of Solomon and 666 now also includes gold in the equation. Now we need to follow up which king other than Solomon was known for gold. If we look into the book of Daniel chapter 2, we will find our answer. In chapter 2 of Daniel, a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar was detailed, wherein he saw an image of a statue of a man having several segments of different materials, such as a head of gold, a chest and arms of silver, the abdomen and hips of bronze, legs of iron, and feet made of a combination of iron and clay. King Nebuchadnezzar demanded of Daniel that he interpret for him the meaning of this dream. Daniel stated that the head of gold represented Nebuchadnezzar himself and his kingdom. The other segments represented kings and kingdoms that would succeed his. If you would like to know more of the real meanings of the segments of this statue, see my video titled "Interpretations of Nebuchadnezzar's Statue Are Wrong." I will put the link to that video into the description of this video. The important information for understanding 666, however, is that King Nebuchadnezzar was that head of gold. Just to review where we are so far, we started with wisdom. That directed us to Solomon, which then took us to gold, and gold took us to King Nebuchadnezzar. But where does Nebuchadnezzar get us? King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold and made everyone bow down to it or die. What was the name given by God to King Nebuchadnezzar? God gave Nebuchadnezzar, that head of gold, the name King of Kings. That can be found in Daniel chapter 2, verse 37, as you see here, quote, "Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory." End quote. Remember then that the Christ returned will be called the King of Kings. Note the capital K's in the King of Kings, as will be shown in chapter 19 in the book of Revelation. The returned Messiah will be the spiritual King of Kings and Lord of Lords, all capital K's and L's in the most English translations. It is blasphemous, then, for any earthly king to call himself by that title in the presence of the true King of Kings, meaning the Messiah of the latter days, meaning the returned Christ Spirit. Also, knowing what the King of Kings is in reference to gives us the clue as to where and when the Messiah will appear. The Shahs, the term for kings of Persia, are called Shah and Shah, which means in English, King of Kings. So this verse is pointing to two Shahs of Persia. Just to review where we are now, we started with wisdom, went to King Solomon, and went to gold, and then went to King Nebuchadnezzar, and now Nebuchadnezzar directs us to the two Shahs of Persia. So, how do we know when these two Shahs would appear? This was explained for verses 5 and 6 in chapter 13 earlier in this video. Remember that time prophecy of 1260 prophetic days? 1260 prophetic days equals 1260 lunar years. It's lunar years here because this prophecy deals with Muhammad's dispensation and the Islamic calendar, which is lunar. The period starts in 622 Common Era, the beginning of the Islamic calendar. If we add 1260 lunar years to that, obviously it ends in the Islamic year of 1260. Converting that to a Gregorian or Western calendar date, that is 1844. Common Era. Here's that timeline again that shows that 1260 days, years prophecy, that it ends in 1844 Common Era, as you see in the bottom right corner. The two kings, known as Shahs, who were the horns on the head of the beast of Persia, who in the 1800s took severe and deadly actions against two persons who claimed to be manifestations of God. These two Shahs together were the third bad beast of the book of Revelation. However, the son, Nasir-Din Shah, was the individual embodiment of the beast 666, due to the cruel intensity of his persecution of both the Bab and Baha'u'llah and their followers. In the upper left is Muhammad Shah Qajar. Qajar is their dynasty's name. He reigned from 1834 until his death in 1848. In the upper right is a photo of Nasir-Din Shah Qajar, who reigned from 1848 until he was assassinated in 1896. Note that when he was crowned prince of Persia, Nasir-Din directly participated in the imprisonment, torture, trial, and finally the killing of the Bab. The timeline shows the reigns of these two kings overlapped the earthly divine reigns of the Lamb, the Elijah figure that is illustrated in the bottom left, and the one who sits on the throne, the Messiah, and these were the Bab and Baha'u'llah respectively. Their divine reigns are illustrated below the timeline. Just to give you a close look at these two Shahs, I've enlarged their portraits here. These are the third beast. Just for your information, since you may be curious about it, there is a painting portrait of the Bab and two photographs of Baha'u'llah in existence, but Bahá'í laws prohibit displaying them to avoid any hint of worshipping idols or images. Thus, no representations of the Bab or Baha'u'llah are shown in this video. A brief review here. The three bad beasts appeared sequentially. The red dragon appeared first, then the second beast murdered the Umayyads, the first beast, and took over their empire. Many years later, the third beast with two horns, meaning two kings, arose from the earth, meaning from Persia, to persecute the two prophets of God, the Lamb and he who sits on the throne of the book of Revelation, thus being considered as talking like the dragon. The text does not describe the third beast except to state it had two horns like a lamb. But it does not say it was a lamb, although I've pictured it here as a lamb. Since it does not mention the number of heads, one could assume there was only one head with two horns, meaning one nation, one dominion, not multiple sections. Horns signify kings, therefore that would be two horns would be two kings of special importance in the fulfillment of the prophecy in chapter 13. I need to emphatically convey to you a warning. Please do not for a moment think that the religion of Islam itself is any of these three beasts. The beasts are the humans who usurped the leadership of Islam from that which Muhammad had designated and the nations they ruled. Beast number 1 and 2, meaning the Umayyad clan and Abbasid clan dynasties of Sunni caliphs, usurped the true leadership from that which Muhammad had designated. Thus, these leaders lacked divine guidance. Indeed, they rejected it. By rejecting the divine guidance, corruption of the leadership of Sunni Islam set in. Now, beast number 3 was a bit different in that it was not the direct leadership of the religion of Islam, but rather of the kingdom of Persia. However, the Shia Muslim clergy at the time beast number 3 made its appearance were very corrupt also. They wielded great power, which they enjoyed and wanted to keep. Thus they encouraged and participated in the persecution of God's latest manifestations, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, who the clergy viewed as a threat to their powerful positions. The problems in Islam in modern times can be traced to the failures of corrupted leadership and their followers that chose to follow the corrupted leaders, not the failure of the pure teachings of Islam. As mentioned, the Quran has not been corrupted, although some portions of it have been misinterpreted. So please do not misconstrue anything in the book of Revelation or in this interpretation of it in this video as in any way condemning the religion of Islam or any of its pure-hearted, devoted followers. On to chapter 14. This slide is just to make an impact on your brain of that fact. Just touching base here at the start of chapter 14 on our location in this chronological cycle number 5 out of the 7 chronological cycles. Reminder, the chapters are in the yellow boxes. Starting on the far left, it states 12, so this cycle starts with chapter 12. Going right, you see the next yellow box states 13, then 14, then 15, and then the last chapter in this cycle is 16. We are right here, where the red arrow is pointing at the start of chapter 14. The color coding tells us that, starting on the left with chapter 12, that it starts about the corrupted form of Islam after the effects of bad beasts number 1 and 2 have their effect. Those are the light green boxes. Then it turns lavender, which shows when bad beast number 3 shows up, because the Lamb has arrived and declared his identity and mission. When the Lamb shows up, the Bab, his opposer, you might say the Antichrist spirit, is not far behind. The lavender lasts through chapter 14 because that chapter is about the Lamb who was the Bob again. Then chapters 15 and 16 are about the dispensation of He who sits on the throne, Baha'u'llah. Chapters 12 through 14 are covered in this video number 8 of the study course. Chapters 15 and 16 will be in video number 9. Chapter 14, verse 1, quote, "And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads." End quote. We start with this clause, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. This verse reaffirms that the followers of the returned Christ will be identified with a new name. See also Isaiah chapter 63 verse 3 and Revelation chapter 2 verse 17 and Revelation chapter 3 verse 12. It emphasizes that the faithful will not be recognized by the name of the Son, but by the name of the Father. For this reason, the followers of Jesus are told to expect a new name. What is in their foreheads? Their brains are in their foreheads. So the followers of the Christ returned in the station of the Father will be deeply devoted to Him in their hearts, souls, and minds. So what about the 144,000? The right to enter the kingdom of God is not inherited but earned through purity of soul. This was established back in Revelation chapter 7 verse 4. Those who will be with the Lamb have an inward quality which is acceptable to God. These 144,000 would be those who recognize the returned Christ Spirit in the station of Elijah, meaning they recognize the Lamb, which we Baha'is believe is the Bab. Is there a special significance to this number, you might wonder, 144,000? Well, now we get to apply Bible prophecy math that we have encountered before in chapters 1, 5, and 7. We start with the number 144,000. Then we add the digits from one side to the other, such as 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, which equals 9. The number 9. Remember from video number 1 of this course that the Alpha and Omega also equals 9, and the Arabic word Baha, which means glory, a reference to Baha'u'llah, also equals 9. This is a quote from the writings of Baha'u'llah, who Baha'is believe is the Messiah of the latter days. The topic is the people of Baha, that is, the people of glory, which is a reference to Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah means the glory of God. This is a quote from his book, Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah. Quote, "How great the blessedness that awaiteth the king who will arise to aid my cause in my kingdom, who will detach himself from all else but me. Such a king is numbered with the companions of the crimson ark, the ark which God hath prepared for the people of Baha. All must glorify his name, must reverence his station, and aid him to unlock the cities with the keys of my name. The omnipotent protector of all that inhabit the visible and invisible kingdoms. Such a king is the very eye of mankind, the luminous ornament on the brow of creation, the fountainhead of blessings unto the whole world. Offer up, O people of Baha, your substance, nay, your very lives, for his assistance." End quote. By using the number 144,000 as the number of those who would be sealed by God, verse 4 was identifying those people as being associated with the number 9. Baha'is are convinced that those who were sealed by God were the followers of Baha, value of 9, a reference to Baha'u'llah. Note that anyone can join this group, the people of Baha, by becoming a believer in Baha'u'llah as the manifestation of God for this new era, the Spirit of Truth. It is not an elite or exclusive group of people. God is the one deciding who is a true believer after all. Although not the sole proof that Baha'u'llah's followers are the 144,000 mentioned here in Revelation, the intersection of these numbers having the same value, in my mind, makes the theory that Baha'u'llah is he who sits on the throne intriguing and definitely worthy of further investigation. The lamb symbolizes sacrifice. It could represent Jesus, except that this is a prophecy of events which are to occur after Jesus, thus must refer to the Lamb which is foretold to come in the future to John. The prophetic Lamb, the messenger of God who is sacrificed in order to guide mankind to the returned Christ Spirit, was remarkably fulfilled in the person of the Bab. The Bab was the door or gate through which humanity gained access to Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah's followers are those who have his name written in their foreheads, meaning they believe and act according to his teachings. The name which the believers have in their foreheads is the name of the Heavenly Father. Jesus foretold that he would return in the glory of the Father. Baha'u'llah fulfills those promises. Now we're going to talk about Zion. Zion means sunny. Mount Zion is the sunny mount. The followers of the Father, he who sits on the throne, are described as standing upon Mount Zion with the Lamb. Recall that the promised messengers of God have been likened to the sun. That's from Revelation chapter 21, verse 23. And thus, anywhere they are is where it is sunny. Note that we will have a lot more about the topic Zion when we get to chapter 21. It should be noted that the Bab is buried on the slopes of the mountain of God, Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel. This is where the cave of Elijah is located. It's where Elijah lived, worked, and prayed. The photo on the right is of the shrine of the Bab, where he is buried. He was killed in Tabriz, Persia, then his body hidden for decades from the authorities. Around the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s, his body was secretly transported to the Holy Land and placed by Abdu'l-Baha in the building that is the base of this structure. The dome was added much later. The book of Malachi, chapter 4, verse 5, promised that Elijah would come before the Christ returns to announce his coming. The Bab is the promised Elijah and the Lamb of the book of Revelation. When Baha'is visit the shrine of the Bab, we literally stand next to the Lamb upon the mountain of the Lord, surrounded by the light or guidance of God. Verses 2 and 3, quote, "And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth." End quote. Let's look at this phrase. I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. The voice from heaven, which was like the voice of many waters, was previously identified in chapter 1. It is the voice of he who sits on the throne, Baha'u'llah. A new song of worship is sung before the throne. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. This new song is like the new name which no one knows except those that receive it. That is found in Revelation chapter 2, verse 17. We know that those who will recognize the new manifestation of God will receive a new name. That's in Revelation chapter 2, verse 17, 3, verse 12, and Isaiah chapter 62, verse 2. The number of believers is symbolic and serves to identify that new name as Bahá'í, a follower of Baha, glory. We got that from the number 144,000 being the number 9. Unless one hears about the Baha'i faith and recognizes its truth, he will not know the new name given by God or the new song of praise which Baha'u'llah has revealed. That has most definitely proven true, as the majority of humankind have never even ever heard of the Baha'i faith as I develop these videos. So few who hear of it actually investigate it. That is contrary to what Jesus instructed his followers to do. Remember, he cautioned them to watch for him. Verses 4 and 5, quote, "These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God." End quote. Now for this peculiar phrase, quote, "they which were not defiled with women," end quote. To be defiled with women does not mean that to be with a woman is the cause of impurity. God has created both men and women because this is the biological system with which he desired to order his world. Nothing which God creates is evil. The station of woman has been elevated in the Baha'i writings, and the most great Spirit of God was revealed to Baha'u'llah as a maid of heaven. What is intended by women in this verse is the symbolic representation of the various religions which have become impure. Remember our discussion at the beginning of chapter 12, just before we were introduced to the woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet. Those whose hearts have not been defiled with imperfect religious traditions and beliefs, likened to fornication or prostitution, are considered virgins. Religion which has become impure, symbolized as a harlot, will be encountered later in the prophecy. This phrase is next, quote, "they follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth," end quote. This has special significance. The Lamb, when he was Jesus, was crucified and ascended to heaven. The Lamb returned as the Bab. Jesus said that those who are his sheep know his voice and follow it. It does not matter whether he raises the call from Jerusalem or Shiraz, Persia. Those who recognized his voice became his disciples and gave their lives for his cause. This is why they are called the firstfruits. This term firstfruits signifies sacrifice to God of the earliest harvest. The first to believe in the messenger of God, those early disciples who sacrificed their all in the path of God, are the earliest harvest, and so they are the firstfruits. God has judged these souls to be without blemish and therefore acceptable as a sacrifice. Verses 6 and 7, quote, "And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters." End quote. In this segment to dissect, about John of Patmos saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel. The angel soaring in heaven represents a soul who is free from worldly qualities and has taken on the attributes of heaven. He has the everlasting gospel to preach to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. This angel will spread the gospel to mankind. The everlasting gospel is the eternal, unchanging law of God. Obedience to this law is the source of all joy and peace for the nations. As such, it is always good news. Only when humanity is disobedient to that law is it judged to be worthy of the wrath of God. The hour represents the appearance of the manifestation of God in the world. Through his appearance, the everlasting gospel, the Word of God, is renewed. But in this hour, during the revelation of this manifestation of God, judgment will come. He will judge the corrupt institutions governing the affairs of mankind. Heaven, earth, sea are symbols of God's creation. More about these symbols will be elaborated upon when we get to chapter 21. The waters spoken of here are not the literal H2O type of water, but rather what Isaiah spoke of in chapter 55. Here is verse 1 of that chapter from Isaiah, quote, "Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Yes, come, buy wine and milk without money and without price." End quote. Obviously, when it is said you should buy these things even though you have no money, that the water, wine, and food here are symbolic of spiritual nourishment, not material goods. The fountain of waters means that spiritual knowledge will flow abundantly from this manifestation of God. Verse 8, quote, "And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." End quote. This is one of the more famous excerpts from the book of Revelation. Quote, "Babylon is fallen, that great city." End quote. The top illustration is one artist's vision of what Babylon looked like. And below, at the bottom, there is a photo of the reality of the ruins of Babylon. Note that the city of Babylon was destroyed more than 600 years before this book of Revelation was revealed to John. So the use of the name Babylon here is obviously symbolic of something else. Babylon is another symbol for corrupt religion, here identified with the same description as that of the harlot in Revelation chapter 17, verse 2. Babylon is the old Jerusalem which is destroyed to make room for the new Jerusalem which descends out of heaven. See Revelation chapter 21, verse 2. It is because the light of religion fades that a new messenger must come to renew that light. Because the religious guides, such as the clergy, are themselves blind, each messenger of God has been tormented or killed by those to whom he comes. In this verse, it is prophesied that the very evil which has been done in the name of religion will be the cause of the destruction of those same religious institutions. In other words, Babylon, signifying corrupt religious institutions, will be destroyed because of its failure to abide by the laws of God. Verses 9 to 12, quote, "And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with the fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name." Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. End quote. The beast spoken of here is the third bad beast in the book of Revelation. We know the Umayyads began this history of the beasts. They were the red dragon. Then the second beast was the Abbasids. Now, in the time of the Lamb, the Bab, the beast, was the two Qajar Shahs, kings of Persia. Qajar was their dynasty name. These two Persian kings are shown here above the green timeline. In the upper left is Muhammad Shah Qajar. He reigned as Shah of Persia from 1834 until his death in 1848. In the upper right is a photo of Nasir-Din Shah Qajar, the son of the previous Shah, who reigned from 1848 until he was assassinated in 1896. Note that when he was crowned prince of Persia, Nasir-Din directly participated in the imprisonment, trial, torture, and finally the killing of the Bab. The timeline shows the reigns of these two kings overlapped the earthly divine reigns of the Lamb, who was the Bab, and the one who sits on the throne, the Messiah, who were the Bab and Baha'u'llah respectively. Their divine reigns are illustrated below the timeline. The Qajar beast worshipped the previous red dragon beast of the Umayyads, in that they too filled their kingdom with every form of corruption, just as the Umayyads, then the Abbasids, did. The works of their hands doing evil and corrupt practices was the mark of this beast. Those who were involved in these corrupt practices of the Shahs bore this mark of their participatory corruption. It was not a physical mark, but rather a spiritual or character mark. It was a physical mark in the sense that one's behavior is observable. The mark of the beast was covered in more detail in Chapter 13 earlier in this video, if you recall. Those who follow the beast will suffer when the divine law takes hold of the corrupt institutions and removes them from power. The torment which occurs in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb appears to be an eternal torment, for the smoke from that torment rises up forever and ever. Jesus taught that after death there is a separation between those who are near to God and those who are remote from Him. That separation, he said, is inviolate. That's in Luke chapter 16, verse 26. The only time that those who worship the beast can be in the presence of the Lamb and his angels is when the Lamb is revealed in this world with his angels. Those are his pure followers. It is the smoke of their torment which ascends forever, not their association with the Lamb or his followers. One possible torment of those who would oppose the manifestation of God is to know that they were powerless to harm the progress of his cause. No matter how many innocents they kill, the new faith of God continues to grow. In addition, having opposed the messenger of God makes them the same as those who oppose the messenger whose religion they claim to be upholding. Baha'u'llah wrote about the ramification of denial of the manifestation of God. This is from a tablet he wrote, which is called the Tablet of Ahmad. Quote, "Be thou assured in thyself that verily he who turneth away from this beauty hath also turned away from the messengers of the past, and showeth pride towards God from all eternity to all eternity." End quote. As to the patience of the saints, we have been told earlier in Revelation chapter 13, verse 9, that those who lead into captivity will be led into captivity, and those who kill with the sword will be killed with the sword. This concept affirms that to worship the beast brings its own punishment. Those who keep the commandments of God and those who keep the faith of Jesus are identified as saints or angels who will accompany the Lamb. This fact underscores a very important point. Christians who accept Baha'u'llah as the returned Christ do not give up on Jesus. Rather, they keep his faith by fulfilling his wishes, for he promised that he would return in the glory of the Father, who is Baha'u'llah, according to Bahá'ís. This is the same process that occurred when certain Jews recognized Jesus as their Messiah. Their love for Moses and his teachings were not put aside. Rather, Jesus fulfilled the promises given by Moses of another prophet to come. The disciples of Jesus fulfilled the wishes of Moses when they recognized him. They kept the covenant with Moses. Verse 13, quote, "And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them." End quote. How can the dead die? This is like the question which Nicodemus asked Jesus after Jesus said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." To this Nicodemus asked, "How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born?" That's from John chapter 3, verses 3 to 4. To be born again is to live for the things of the Spirit and die to the things of the world. It means to die to self. Therefore, the dead which die are those who were spiritually dead through ignorance of the life of the Spirit. These souls become blessed when they recognize the messenger of God and are filled with the Spirit of life. Through this transformation, they no longer have any attachment to this nether world. Therefore, it is said that they die in the Lord. The Bab has written, quote, "True death is realized when a person dieth to himself at the time of his revelation in such wise that he seeketh not except him." End quote. Verses 14 through 16, quote, "And I looked, and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he sat on the cloud, thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped." End quote. Jesus often referred to himself as the Son of Man. Jesus declared that at his return he would come on a cloud. The one on the cloud is described as like unto the Son of Man. He was wearing a golden crown, indicative of his divine nature. The ministry of the Bab was virtually identical to that of Jesus. This is why he is likened to the Son of Man. This is why both are described as lambs. The Bab is the person described in these verses 14 through 16. Jesus spoke to his disciples about the harvest in which they were participating. It is the harvest of souls who are ready to receive God's new message. That is from the book of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 37, quote, "Then he said to his disciples, The harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." End quote. Obviously, this is the kind of harvest the book of Revelation is speaking of, the harvesting of souls, meaning teaching God's word among them and finding those who accept the teachings. Verses 17 through 19, quote, "And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vines of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God." End quote. In chapter 3 of the book of Joel, similar verses describe the last days when God will come to judge the earth. Those verses state that the winepress is full because the wickedness of the people is great. It also says that the latter days will be a time of decision for all the world's peoples. They will have to decide whether to accept the counsels and admonitions of God or to continue to turn away. In the next few slides, we will review key passages from this chapter 3 of the book of Joel. As I read this excerpt from Joel, note the similarities to Revelation chapter 14. This is Joel chapter 3, verses 13 through 17, quote, "Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, go down, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and moon will grow dark, and the stars will diminish their brightness. The Lord also will roar from Zion, and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and earth will shake, but the Lord will be a shelter for his people, and the strength of the children of Israel. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then Jerusalem shall be holy, and no aliens shall ever pass through her again." End quote. Joel stated that the Lord will roar from Zion, which is the spiritual city of God, the place of his revelation. Then new wine will be found in the mountains. The new wine, Jesus has told us, is the new teaching from God. Note the references to mountains in Joel. Mountains represent religions. The winepress is not for the branches, but for the grapes, the fruit of the vine. The vine is the planting of God, his religion. Because the returned Christ has come to unite all the people of the world, it is the fruit of the 7 previous religions which will be harvested. The fruit represents the first believers and their capacity to hear the new word of God. Without that capacity, the new revelation cannot be given. When the angel harvests the grapes, it is thus symbolized that new wine or teachings can be made. The grapes, the people, are ripe for the picking, so to speak. This symbol also indicates sacrifice, as grapes must be crushed for wine to be made. It is significant that one of the angels which has power over fire is included in the harvest scene, since Jesus taught that branches which bear no fruit will be burned. Verse 20, the last verse in chapter 14, quote, "And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs." End quote. For clarity of meaning, I have also provided the New King James Version of this verse here. The New King James Bible replaces many of the Elizabethan English terms with more modern English terminology, so we can understand it better. The New Version states, quote, "And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles, for 1,600 furlongs." End quote. We are going to start with that last phrase in the chapter, 1,600 furlongs, a number 1,600. You should know by now how we handle such numbers to get their true meaning. We add the digits together. 1 plus 6 plus 0 plus 0, which equals 7. So the number 7 is important to understand this verse. The furlongs term is extraneous. The unit of measurement, like the inch, feet, mile, etc., is not the important part of the verse, just the numbers. The winepress was trampled outside the city. This verse is yet another reference to the seven faiths which have preceded those of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. The city is the city of God, the New Jerusalem. It represents the new law of God. Those who are outside of the city are those who have not recognized the new faith, the believers from the past faiths. The number 7 is a reference to those 7 faiths. Just as the people of Baha are identified with the number 144,000, if you recall that equals 9, the people of all the previous dispensations are identified with 1 plus 6 equals 7. Recall that this is the number of religions described in chapters 2 and 3 of the book of Revelation. Therefore, this verse foretells that just as Jesus sent his disciples from Jerusalem to spread the gospel, so will the Christ of the second advent send his followers out of the holy city to spread the everlasting gospel to people of all the world's faiths. Then we have this phrase to analyze. Blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles. This sets a rather gruesome image in our minds. Up to the horses' bridles indicates great quantities of blood will flow. Blood is the symbol of sacrifice. In verse 8 of this chapter we read, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. In the following chapters we will discover that her wine of wrath is the blood of the martyrs. The harvest of believers is described as grapes, crushed to make wine or blood, which indicates sacrifice. Remember from that excerpt from verse 8 of chapter 14 that stated, she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath. That these believers in the returned Christ, he who sits on the throne, will come from all nations indicates a worldwide phenomenon of persecution. Corrupt religion, symbolized as Babylon, will persecute the believers of the new faith, as Babylon will be unwilling to relinquish its prestige and power. This is the end of chapter 14 and the end of this video, number 8, but it is not the end of chronological cycle number 5. Cycle 5 continues on with chapter 15, which is in the next video in this course, video number 9. Just a visual reinforcement here. Please go to video number 9. Please note that this video is an amateur production by this singular person, me. It is not an official production of the Baha'i Faith community. Copyright protections are claimed. Please do not make changes, additions, or deletions to this presentation. If you have any questions, please contact me at that email address you see there. And thank you for watching.